Good morning. This has been noticed as the time and place of the Commission's oversight hearing in case number 8903, the Electric Universal Service Program. We are required by Section 7-512 of the Public Utilities Act with the oversight responsibility for the bill assistance and the arrearage retirement components of this plan. Obviously a very important plan that provides benefits to over 100,000 households in the state, including direct bill payments, arrearage assistance, and low-income weatherization, which is administered by the Department of Housing and Community Development. Today we'll begin with a presentation from the Department of Human Services Office of Home Energy Programs, who administers the bill payments and the arrearage assistance programs. So I would ask that we start with that presentation, if the Office of Home Energy Programs could approach. For the rest of the day, just so people know where they are in the lineup, we're going to have Housing and Community Development present afterwards. We'll have the utilities present together. We'll take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll start with the Retail Electric Supply Association, followed by IERR, Office of the People's Counsel, and then Commission staff will clean up at the end of the day. So thank you for appearing today. We'll get started on time. Do the commissioners have any questions or opening statements? Nope. Okay. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman Stanek. Hope I pronounced that correctly. Welcome. Members of the Commission, my name is Bill Freeman. I'm the Director of the Office of Home Energy Programs at the Maryland Department of Human Services. I've been in this position since November 2016, so it's my pleasure to be here for a second EUSP Operations Plan hearing. I'd like to thank the Commission and the Public Service Commission staff for their support and guidance over the years. I also want to thank OHEP's local administering agencies, our utility partners, advocates, and customers who do the heavy lifting, provide invaluable feedback and insights, and support OHEP in our efforts to make sure that Marylanders in need are connected to home energy. I also want to thank the Office of People's Counsel, the utilities, the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research, and the Retail Energy Suppliers Association for their thoughtful and valuable comments. I'd be pleased to address any of the substance of these comments this morning that I don't address in my opening comments. The Department of Human Services, through the Office of Home Energy Programs, is responsible for administering the Electric Universal Service Program, or EUSP, and the Maryland Energy Assistance Program, or MEAP. There is a single application for all energy assistance benefits administered through OHEP, and the application also serves as a referral to the Department of Housing and Community Development for weatherization and energy efficiency services. The stated goal of EUSP is to help make electric bills more affordable for low-income families, although in many cases it merely helps maintain service. There are two components of this program: the bill payment assistance, and arrearage retirement assistance. The EUSP bill assistance is funded by electric ratepayers. The electric arrearage retirement assistance program, as well as any additional need for bill payment assistance, is funded through revenues generated by the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative by way of the Maryland Strategic Energy Investment Fund. The goal of MEAP, on the other hand, is to help make heating bills more affordable to low-income families. MEAP provides benefits for all types of heating, including electric, gas, propane, oil, kerosene, coal, wood, and whatever the case may be. In FY 2019, MEAP will also help address past due gas balances along with the lines of the Electric Arrearage Retirement Assistance Program. MEAP is entirely federally funded through the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Block Grant, commonly referred to as LIHEAP. The statutory income eligibility guideline limits benefits to households with incomes at or below 175% of the federal poverty guideline. The highest benefits always support those households with the lowest incomes and the greatest energy burdens. The State Office of Home Energy Programs administers energy assistance programs through 20 local administering agencies in the 24 jurisdictions. Administering agencies consist of governmental and nonprofit organizations. 8 of these agencies administer energy assistance through local departments of social services. 2 are administered via local governments, and the remaining 10 administering agencies are contracted nonprofit community action agencies. Before addressing the EUSP annual plan and program improvement initiatives OHEP will undertake in the coming year, I'd like to start by giving a brief overview of the last program year. In FY 2018, bill assistance benefit expenditures from both the USP ratepayer funds and RGGI funds amounted to $47,157,000, and those provided benefits to 94,655 households, with an average benefit of $498. $14,685,000 in arrearage benefits from RGGI funds were issued to 16,862 households at an average benefit of $871. MEEP benefits from federal LIHEAP funds amounted to $55,096,000 and were paid to 97,477 households. 97,477 households at an average of $565 benefit. In many recent years, it should be noted, OHEP would also issue a supplemental benefit from funds remaining toward the end of the program year. For example, in FY 17, OHEP issued an average supplemental benefit from LIHEAP funds of $203 to approximately 88,000 households. There was no supplemental benefit issued in FY 18 because any and all of the funds necessary to satisfy the electric benefits in the final months of the year due to declining RGGI revenues. Applications for assistance continue to remain steady in FY 18, and they have increased or decreased within 1 or 2 percentage points for the last 4 program years. I would note, however, that thus far in FY 19, there are 23% more applications in the OHEP data management system than this time last year. And this is primarily because of the initiative we undertook to process applications year-round, straight through the month of June, which I'll discuss momentarily. This allowed for additional outreach and reduced bottlenecks in processing. Beyond the numbers, several initiatives were completed in 2018 to improve service delivery. We rewrote entirely the OHEP operations manual, which is being prepared for full release. This will help us streamline the processing of applications and ensure uniformity of policy application across all jurisdictions. We developed the infrastructure, as I just referenced, to process applications year-round. It may not seem like it's that much of a challenge to process 12 months of the year instead of 11, but it was a heavy lift nonetheless. And then we initiated a recertification process that will establish for seniors, the disabled, and fixed-income households a streamlined, simplified application process that will make sure they don't have to submit all the same documents every single year. We also, as referenced, initiated the gas arrearage benefit out of LIHEAP funds that will help customers who've fallen behind on their gas service to receive a benefit similar to those they receive for electricity. The funding available for FY19 will allow OHEP to continue to provide electric bill payment assistance to approximately 98,000 households with an average benefit of $500. The benefit matrix for bill payment assistance considers income, household size, energy use, and several other factors to determine the final benefit. EUSP bill assistance benefits range from a minimum of $120 to a maximum of $860. The Office of People's Counsel in their filed comments note that this benefit level is $200 less than the benefit levels in 2010 when adjusted for inflation. I would just note that it's important to realize that in 2010 we had 3 times the number of no-income households. It was at the tail end of the recession. A significant number of households were coming to us with little or no income, and income is a significant factor in the determination of the benefit. We see ourselves on a fairly steady trajectory in terms of the average benefit overall. It's also important to note that all EUSP ratepayer and RGGI funds were fully expended in FY 2018. OHEP has therefore maintained the benefit calculation from 2018 into the current year. OHEP will dedicate $14 million in RGGI funding to arrearage retirement assistance, which will provide benefits to approximately 16,000 households at an estimated benefit of $870. Electric arrearage benefits are available to a customer once every 7 years for arrearages between $300 and $2,000. Waivers are available, allowing vulnerable populations to receive the benefit with greater frequency when necessary. Over the last 2 years, OHEP increased screening for arrearage assistance, resulting in a 20% increase in the number of households receiving the benefit in 2018. OHEP local administering agencies are screening 40% more households today for arrearage retirement than they were in 2016. Although the final MEEP benefits are not calculated until OHEP is formally made aware of the LIHEAP allocation to the state of Maryland, EUSP benefit determination is fully integrated with the benefit for MEEP. This methodology results in a targeted benefit that makes bills affordable and makes effective use of the total dollars available for benefits. In FY 2019, OHEP will also take gas arrearages into consideration when calculating those MEEP benefits. It is important that the Commission be aware that the energy assistance funding landscape in Maryland is shifting. While there are concerns that LIHEAP may be eliminated as proposed in consecutive White House budget proposals, Congress has continued to appropriate stable and even increased funding for LIHEAP. The more significant concern is declining RGGI revenues, which over the past 5 years alone have helped approximately 80,000 households eliminate their arrearages and start fresh. Under current statute, OHEP receives at least 50% of the revenues collected through RGGI for EUSP and provide a reliable source of funds for electric bill payment and EUSP ratepayer funds when they're exhausted. As noted, OHEP spent all appropriated EUSP ratepayer and RGGI funds in FY 2018. For the first time, OHEP had to rely on some MEEP funds to cover electric bills in May and June. RGGI auction proceeds declined significantly from the high levels of 2013 through 2015. While this decline will not affect EUSP operations in FY 2019 due to the availability of over-collected EUSP ratepayer funds from 2010 to 2017, bill assistance benefit levels could be reduced in 2020, and arrearage retirement assistance may be limited at the tail end of the program year in 2020. A bill entitled Electric Universal Service Program Unexpended Funds was enacted during the 2017 legislative session. This bill increases the expenditures by up to $14.8 million for authorized purposes. The funds are the excess and unexpended EUSP ratepayer collections accumulated between FY 2010 and 17 and can be used for bill assistance, arrearage retirement, targeted and enhanced weatherization, and/or arrearage management programs. Another bill in the most recent legislative session requires OHEP to dedicate $750,000 of the unexpended bill assistance and arrearage funds in the Electric Universal Service Program to an arrearage prevention program, which includes rooftop solar installation and solar job training. The increase in spending authorized by this bill allows OHEP to maintain levels of service in bill payment and arrearage retirement. As a result of the declines in RGGI revenue and the appropriation from these special funds in FY 19, OHEP expects to fully expend these funds solely for bill assistance and arrearage retirement assistance. Reduced funding in FY 2020 and beyond, however, will stifle any opportunity to implement innovative responses to affordability concerns or additional approaches to arrearages. It also will lead to limitations and inflexibility in tailoring certain benefits to appropriately address energy burdens and limit the availability of benefits for those most in need. One such innovation that will be put on hold due to funding concerns is the Supplemental Targeted Energy Program, or STEP. In the 2016 EUSP operations hearing, my predecessor made the Commission aware of a process to establish a new program intervention to help customers access resources that would help them better manage their household's energy burden. In last year's hearing, I discussed the fruits of that process, which was the Supplemental Targeted Energy Program. STEP is a program enhancement featuring an incentivized benefit of up to $1,000 over the course of a year. The benefit will be delivered monthly and contingent upon a customer completing 3 phases, namely service coordination, taking advantage of whatever else is out there, energy education, and sustainability planning for their household. The administration of STEP was to be funded by LIHEAP Assurance $16, which allows for up to 5% of the state's allocation to be used for such purposes. The benefits of STEP would have come from that RGGI funding. With the declines in RGGI funding, implementation of STEP will be put on indefinite hold. While incentivizing customers to move forward informed and sustainable energy use is a worthy goal, it is much more important to ensure that funds are available throughout the year for customers at risk of termination. OHEP will continue to monitor RGGI revenues and implement a version of STEP in the future, should those revenues improve. Even without STEP or other creative program interventions, OHEP works to ensure success is measured in dynamic ways. The most important measure of success is the timely delivery of benefits to those households facing a crisis. 10% of households receiving benefits were living in a home where the utility service was terminated, and an additional 40% applied with a termination notice in hand. In such circumstances, it is challenging to focus on affordability and sustainability issues, but OHEP still does so through the targeting of benefits. Regarding the targeting of benefits, OHEP respects that this is a great deal of money and aims to be good stewards of ratepayer funds. It's therefore important that we make the most of these funds to achieve real results. Several years ago, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services announced a new approach to performance management through a set of key performance indicators across all states. Fiscal year 2016 marked the first year that data were collected, allowing for an accurate calculation of key indicators of program effectiveness. The LIHEAP performance measures demonstrate that OHEP benefits significantly reduce energy burdens with many households at higher income thresholds, with many of those households having their energy burdens reduced to 6% or below of their household income. Challenges remain, however, in reducing energy burdens for those under 75% of the federal poverty level, but we continue to look at the targeting of those benefits to those most in need. OHEP is committed to ensuring that those who apply and are eligible receive the benefits in a timely fashion. In the last decade, OHEP has made considerable progress toward more timely application processing. A decade ago, the average time to process an application for assistance was over 60 days. The average number of days is now on track to be less than 20. One unintended side effect of this improved processing time is an increase in denial rates by strictly adhering to the COMAR requirement of giving the applicant 15 days from the date of notification to provide missing information. And in 2007, for example, 9% of all applications that OHEP received were denied. In 2018, that increased to 28%. 68% of all applications denied are the result of missing documentation. Only 29% of those denied are denied because they are over income. So we put in place a number of key strategies that will help us reduce these denial rates. One is the reference redetermination process. This will affect approximately 20,000 households that we serve every year, and it will allow seniors, fixed income households, disabled households to simply verify the existing information in our records and not have to submit the entire application packet every single year. We think this will not only streamline application processing for those households for whom much information doesn't change year to year, but it will also free up our local agencies to follow up with those households who are missing information. As mentioned previously, we've also, OHEP has historically taken the month of June to close out and to adjust for the next year. This was our first year of processing applications through the entire month of June. I think we've already seen the fruits of this. It reduced the bottleneck significantly and allowed us to follow up more directly in the month of June and early July with those customers who are missing information who submit during that time. It also prevents anybody who ever drove down North Charles Street on July 1st in any year would see the lines around the corner. So the more the word gets out that you don't have to show up on July 1st with an application, the better off we'll be in the coming years. We don't want lines wrapped around the corner of any building, and certainly when we can't handle that volume of applications all at one time. So that should help drive down denial rates as well. We'll also reconvene the OHEP Advisory Committee to look at some COMAR changes to examine whether or not that 15 days that's given to an applicant to respond with complete information makes sense. We're also launching a pilot in 3 jurisdictions to text customers who are missing information. That'll be launched in the coming months. We're hoping that drives greater responsiveness as well. We're also going to move toward a stricter adherence to on the 55-day hold. For those of you unfamiliar, the 55-day hold on utility accounts was established at a time when OHEP processing times were greater than 50 days. Today, many applicants submit incomplete applications with no intention of completing the full application merely to get the 55-day hold on their utility account. In recent years, it's become a benefit in its own right. But we've instructed agencies to not seek those 55-day holds outside the 14-day window of the issuance of the termination notice. And we will begin again, if we ever had, notifying utilities of those customers who were denied who had received a 55-day hold. So we would transfer a file of all those who received a 55-day hold and were denied in the interim process. And the customer will be informed that the 55-day hold is good for only either 55 days or the time it takes to process the application, whichever is shorter. We hope with that information, customers will either submit a full application and proceed in good faith with that application, or find another route to address their bill. We're enhancing outreach. The $200,000 that we receive in ratepayer funds, which is in our operations plan, greatly helps us to enhance outreach. Outreach means more than advertising or radio spots or anything like that. We're working directly with our local agencies on proposals to be there with customers in place to help them through the application. Many of our applicants have literacy issues, and our application is no piece of cake for a lot of people. A lot of that language has to be in there for various requirements, but it's not easy to get through. So we're using those funds to really have folks go out into the community to work with their partners at departments of aging, to work with nursing homes, or senior facilities, or any other places where customers may have difficulty completing a full application to do so. We've also made a number of tools available to our local agencies, and we'll continue training on that. So in many cases, we can verify income, household status, various other things through other mechanisms. And that takes me into the next great enhancement, which is MD Think. MD Think is a technological endeavor undertaken by the state of Maryland. DHS is the lead on that, has federal funding and approval to modernize and integrate multiple state health and human services programs targeted toward the most vulnerable. The end result will be a shared technological platform for various web-based technology systems that enable access to Maryland's health and human services programs for expedited or streamlined enrollment and eligibility. OHEP anticipates integration of the OHEP data system within that shared platform by sometime in 2020. So that streamlined MD Think platform will allow for a much quicker, much more streamlined eligibility and enrollment process. So an OHEP worker doesn't have to continuously ask for additional documentation from a worker when they can already see that that household has applied for food stamps and all their documents are related to that application, or any other number of benefit programs. We're also continuing to work with our local DSS offices to manage budgets, administrative budgets, more effectively and efficiently. For non-DSS offices, the nonprofit community action agencies, the next RFP cycle will be in 2020, and that provides the next significant opportunity to address administrative costs. The MD Think initiative, noted previously, will allow for an unprecedented streamlining of eligibility determination and coordination services by 2021. OHEP is working closely with all those involved in that initiative to ensure that energy assistance applicants benefit from the significant investment in human services infrastructure. Finally, I will note that OHEP has not been timely in the submission of reports and plans in recent years, as the Office of People's Counsel rightfully notes in their submitted comments. Going forward, we will submit all reports by October 31st and annual operations plans by June 1st to allow for a thorough consideration of the Office's efforts and plans. Thank you, and as always, thank you as always for your support of OHEP and EUSP, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. You headed off some of my questions on the end regarding the annual report and the operational plan, but I thank People's Counsel for recognizing that timing concern. I was curious, how many staff members do you currently have in OHEP that process applications?
As mentioned, we have there are 6 of us in DHS headquarters, a few blocks away, and then we have the 20 local administering agencies. So in those agencies, there are approximately 220 some staff. So some of those are employees of the local nonprofits with whom we contract. Some of those are DSS employees.
So those social service agencies and the nonprofits act under delegated authority from OHEP to process the application?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Obviously, you have a large budget for FY 2019, approximately $80 million in funds coming from ratepayers, coming from the REGI funds and over-collected funds in prior years. In your operational plan, you make reference to potential fraud and abuse and prosecution of those who misuse the program or file false or misleading documentation. How often do you actually pursue criminal prosecution?
It ends up in criminal prosecution rarely, and often it's tied into other benefits of abuse as well. Typically, when we uncover those things and we work with the Office of the Inspector General on those matters, there are usually food stamp, or SNAP fraud and other things involved. I think we've been involved in 2 cases in the last year, both of which had multiple benefit fraud issues.
And in those cases, the amount of fraud has to be above $2,500?
In those cases.
Okay.
We do make, in the last year we made approximately a dozen referrals to the OIG that had various outcomes.
And for smaller dollar fraud and violations, how do you proceed with those?
So in many circumstances in working with the OIG, there very well may just be a red flag on that individual in the database, preventing them from applying to the program in the next program year or until the matter is resolved. We also pursue repayment from certain customers when it's been determined that it's a lower level of fraud and they perhaps just misled us with regard to the level of income or the number of people in the household. And so we pursue repayment. We currently have, I think, a dozen households in repayment status.
You elaborated on the 55-day hold that was currently, would it be fair, subject to gaming by some applicants?
I don't know if gaming is necessarily the right word. I think people have come to expect that as a benefit in and of itself. It gets out on the street that you can get a 55-day hold on your account.
Simply for filing paper?
Simply for giving an application, correct. And the language of, it's not necessarily ruling, it was an agreement, I think, between Johns Hopkins University, the office, the utilities, and the Public Service Commission. Some of the language in there is vague, because it does refer to the requirement of pursuing the application in good faith. And for years, we've just accepted the fact that you hand us a piece of paper with your name on it as initiating the application in good faith. But that has, I think, led to a proliferation of 55-day holds for those who don't intend to pursue a full application for benefits.
So is word now spreading that it's either 55 days or a shorter period? Whichever.
Well, we've just started that process this year. So last week we just initiated the transfer of the files to the utilities with their payment files to show the households who had received a 55-day hold who were denied in the subsequent weeks. I think it will spread. I think we've informed our agencies to let folks know that the hold is only as good as the time it takes to process your application.
So it may take some time for that.
It usually does take time. I think just like the year-round processing, those things take time to sort of spread word of mouth, that you don't have to show up on July 1, you can't just show up and get a 55-day hold, and those things. So the 55-day hold concern for me is that in terms of administrative costs, we still have to work those applications, and we have to put effort into processing an application that was never going to go anywhere to begin with. So that, that's another issue that I want to address through this process.
And that also distorts your rejection rates, I imagine.
It certainly does.
One more question. I know we have some proposals on the table to reinstitute the PC27 work group here. You also mentioned that you have an OHEP advisory group. I think in your documents here, you stated it hasn't been in effect for the past few years. Can you explain who the group is, what its charge is?
Certainly. So the OHEP advisory group has not been pulled together in a couple of years for a couple of reasons. I'll just start with that. Following 2016, the group was, in modified form, was charged with coming up with what ultimately became the STEP program. So a lot of effort was put into that over the course of 9 months, so there were no formal advisory committee meetings during that time. Over the last year, we really focused on our administrative work groups to rewrite our operations manual, seeing that a number of things in our operations manual had become unaligned with COMAR and other things. So we rewrote that process. So the OHEP advisory works with the Office of Home Energy Programs to really guide strategy and policy. So we'll have members of the Office of People's Counsel, utility representatives, local agency representatives, other human service agency representatives, certainly Department of Housing and Community Development. So all those stakeholders with significant knowledge and involvement of energy assistance in the state of Maryland come together and meet several times a year to help guide us.
So the group currently is constituted or not?
So there is currently a roster. Our next step is to verify with those entities whether or not the representatives from those entities still are willing and ready to serve on that group. So we hope to convene in the next couple months.
Do you believe that that group could substitute for a commission-led work group to investigate some of these issues and whether or not DHS is meeting its goals in executing the EUSP?
I think a number of the issues can be addressed through that channel. We have a large administrative operation to run, so there are always significant administrative issues to address with any advisory group we work specifically with. I think any recommendation from with regard to PC 27 is really referenced more into the broader approach to energy assistance in the state of Maryland. We don't have a percentage of income program in the state as exists in a number of other states. I think our advisory group could make recommendations in steps moving toward that. I think it is important that whether it's us providing reports back to the commission or otherwise, that there is that funding issue, that we've come to rely on RGGI funds to the point where we couldn't spend all the RGGI funds we were receiving for a number of years, and now we've flipped that completely. And now there's a lot less coming from that revenue source as had been coming for a number of years. So I think any recommendation to either revisit PC 27 or have a broader work group is really related to the broader approach to energy assistance in the state. And I don't know if the advisory group is the best platform for that necessarily, just because of the focus on, their focus on making sure that we do the job that we're currently set up to do, not necessarily in what could be in the future for energy assistance.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Also, that was a very good, thorough presentation. So you did knock out a lot of my questions as well, and the chairman hit a number of them as well. So don't want to be repetitive here, but again, back to the advisory committee versus PC 27. I do want to understand what is the ultimate goal of either of these? I guess the PC 27. It seems right now the major issues are funding sources and reliability. Maybe could be reaching the eligible number of Marylanders that ought to be part of this program, or it could be are these adequate to achieving the overall goal, the energy burden? So what exactly would PC 27 do as far as advancing, I guess, solutions to any of these problems, or maybe a problem I haven't?
No, I think you hit on the very issues that you would hope to address in such a public conference, and that were addressed at the time, certainly within PC 27. I think the centerpiece of PC 27 became that percentage of income proposal, which exists in a number of other states. And right now, the energy assistance process is fairly cumbersome, fairly administratively burdensome, in terms of it requires a lot of work on the part of the applicant to complete the application, to provide all the materials, to be screened, and the bulk of our administrative funding goes toward eligibility determination, determining whether or not all the income information provided is correct and accurate. And so, and yet we're still only reaching a fraction of the overall eligible population. I think a lot of people are discouraged by the overall process. So I think overall, the discussion around such a public conference would be with regard to, is there a way to both streamline the entire approach to energy assistance and to make it more broadly available. Now, the big problem with the last discussion was really around cost, I think, in the end. And it was also at a time when Reggie funds were flush and we had plenty of funds. We couldn't even spend the money that was there. But I think the discussion would steer towards that percentage of income program. And, does the state have a goal to enroll more people in a more efficient energy assistance program, which could very well be that percentage of income program? I hope that answers your question.
It did, and I guess what I was going to get to is, what can we, and what is expected that we could do here at the Commission, and what needs to be done in Annapolis? And I just wanted to find out, do we have to wait for a PC 27 conference, or could the advisory committee just, come together and just go to Annapolis and say, hey, these are some significant changes in funding reliability, and setting these other goals. So I just would like to understand,
certainly,
what would we be doing here, and what just needs to be fast forwarded to get to Annapolis?
I think that we could work through a lot of these issues, to Chairman Stanik's point as well, with the advisory committee, if charged to do so by the Commission. I mean, if you gave us the charge to, outline a proposal by next year for perhaps a new approach to a percentage of income program or something along those lines, we could certainly work through that this year.
Okay, so you would think that would have to start here, and it's not something that OHEP and the advisory committee could not just go ahead, since you're the implementer.
I think it always helps when you're encouraging or directing us to do things.
Okay, well,
yeah, I think that's always best if we have that charge.
Okay, and then also just again the percentage of eligible Marylanders that are not participating in the program. Just listening to discussion on the 55-day and how complicated the current process is, are we taking care to make sure that anything we do to try to, I guess, tamp down, if there is gaming, or if it just could be people in distress who want to try every avenue to not further discourage people? Is that also being considered?
We certainly don't want to discourage anybody eligible. I mean, all our outreach efforts are driven toward encouraging particularly the most vulnerable populations, but anybody eligible to come and apply. I think we've approached, for example, the 55-day hold in such a way that folks who are not pursuing that process in good faith do take time, resources away from serving those who are eligible and in need. I think it is a fine line in some ways, but I think it has to be walked, because for every person that we go through who's never going to be eligible for benefits and who just wants 55 days to pay their bill, that takes time, money, resources away from serving the people who need additional help to complete their application, to get the documents in, and to access benefits.
I appreciate very much that answer. The concern I had is that if we get too strict on one side, we
absolutely
further alienate people from the overall program. Finally, it's just on STEP. It's something, since I've arrived, it's been kind of working its way through the process. Now it seems to have hit a brick wall. It seemed to be one of those innovative ideas, concepts that would help address the energy burden side, one of the, I guess, objective. Is that something that we would need to do something here at the Commission, or again, something that really the advisory committee or Annapolis should be aware of, that again, we're not doing some of these innovative things that could address the overall problem?
STEP has hit the wall solely at this point because of the Reggie funding issue. Okay. We're ready to go with it, but in the end, as we discussed in our budget hearings in Annapolis over the last legislative session, the priority still has to be that when folks are coming later in the year, in February, March, April, with arrearages, and who are going to be terminated if those are not addressed, they have to be the priority. We can't we don't want to reach a point where in April of 2020 we're turning people away with an $800 bill simply because, well, we did this other program to help some folks address affordability earlier in the year. So I think that remains our priority, is bill assistance and arrearage, and then move into affordability. So right now, the way things are structured, it really is reliant on those RGGI revenues recovering. If we had the RGGI revenues back to where they were 2 years ago, we would look to implement that again, perhaps with some tweaks in terms of targeting for the populations. But we're ready and willing to do it when the revenues are there.
Okay, and I would to make that my last, but do you have recommendations on how, if the revenues are not there, to find revenues to support some of these programs that could, again, address the real problem and not just these crises, these symptoms?
I don't, right, at this time. I think if we had recommendations for finding revenue sources for that particular program, we would have kind of moved forward with that. But
it's more of an Annapolis issue then, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Freeman, I wanted to explore a couple different things with you. We're about a month and a half into FY19, and I wanted to talk to you about a bill that you mentioned in your remarks, House Bill 1528.
Correct.
It has a Senate counterpart. So that bill also became effective July 1st, contiguous with the new fiscal year. I want to explore where you're at in that bill implementation a little bit. So you're required, the department is required, in consultation with the Public Service Commission, to select 2 public or private entities as program recipients to administer the provisions of that bill. Where is the department at in consulting with the PSC and in selecting those 2 recipients?
We've had discussions with commission staff about the meaning and intent of those bills. We still read that bill as being unexpended funds, that we would use unexpended funds in the final format of the bill as the language.
Well, the way I read the language, it says in Section 2 that in fiscal 2019, DHS must dedicate $750,000 of the unexpended bill assistance arrearage funds in the USP.
Correct. Yeah.
So
and at this point, we don't project having unexpended bill assistance or arrearage funds from that pot of money.
So you're not planning to move forward with that program?
If it looks as though we are not going to spend all the money for bill assistance and arrearage this year, we certainly will move forward with that. And we'll be in consultation with commission staff regarding that. But because of the declining RGGI revenues, actually, RGGI revenues, we had a deficiency appropriation in FY18, so we started the year with a $37 million appropriation. That was reduced to $27 million during the session. So we had to scramble a bit, rework some things to use LIHEAP money for those funds. This year, we're again at $26 million for the RGGI appropriation. So we've lost a significant amount of revenue from that RGGI source. And that the over-collected DUSP money is making up for that difference. So right now, we don't project having unexpended dollars, just as we didn't in FY18 from bill assistance and arrearage.
So I think when this bill passed in FY18, the legislature probably intended that you would have unexpended funds and that it would be expended on this program. Have you reconsulted with the legislature through your departmental legislative liaison in this regard?
We did have discussions during the process with Delegate Clippinger, who's the lead sponsor of the House bill, regarding that, and made him aware of the declines in RGGI revenue. And we haven't consulted since then, but we certainly can.
So I would recommend that the department do consult with both Senator Klausmeier, who was the sponsor in the Senate,
yes,
and Delegate Clippinger, who's now the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee in the next session, or has been appointed to be the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee in the next session, to let them know that the department is not even moving forward with their planning for this program. And I would recommend you do that very soon, so that they're not surprised come January.
Certainly.
Because obviously the legislature voted these bills unanimously. 137 to 0 in the House and 46 to nothing in the Senate. That means the legislature
Right.
intended for you to implement this plan, not based on some projection that, well, we're not even going to pursue it. So I would highly recommend that the department
We will do so,
consult the
yes.
legislature. Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Let me talk about STEP a little bit and follow up on some of Commissioner Richards' questions on STEP. 2016, you create STEP. You can get a recommendation for it. It's the newest thing since sliced bread, and it's going to fix a lot of problems. 2017, it's kind of on hold. But last year when you were in here, you told us you were re-implementing and getting STEP back on track, I believe, if I recall properly, and that it was going to solve a lot of the concerns that we had about denials and a lot of the concerns about process issues and getting people into the program. And you just said, I think, if I recall properly, I just need a little more time to get it implemented, back up and running, and back on track, and we fully expect to get STEP moving.
Right.
And now I'm hearing it's dead again. Please help me understand that.
Certainly. So at the time, 2016, when in 2016 was really the start of the initial STEP planning process. So an advisory committee specifically for program enhancements was pulled together. That took place under my predecessor through 2016 into 2017. I arrived, we started building the infrastructure, fully intending to implement STEP. At that time, Reggie surpluses were building up on the side, even beyond our appropriation or what we could spend. So it was a different revenue landscape altogether. At the same time as that was happening, the Reggie auctions declined precipitously. So it had to do with a ruling at the Supreme Court with regard to the Clean Power Plan, et cetera. So the auctions collapsed by, I think, almost 70%. Which then has a lagging effect on the revenues that come to the Maryland Strategic Energy Investment Fund and then over to us. So at this time last year, we still were carving out, and as we had said in our FY17 budget hearings in Annapolis, that we were still reserving those funds if they were there to implement STEP. The thing is, when you're talking about enrolling an additional 10,000 plus folks initially, and then up to 25,000 households at an additional benefit of $1,000, you got to make sure that revenue is there. With the declining Reggie revenues and the fact that our appropriation last year was reduced from 37 to 27 in the middle of the year, that decision just had to be made that we still have to prioritize bill assistance and arrearage over any program enhancements. And I spent 9 months of my life, refining that STEP program and building the infrastructure. So I'm invested in it. I want to eventually do it. I think it will be helpful to a lot of folks, but I think we still have to prioritize the emergency need over anything else.
I appreciate that. So let's use that as a segue then into budget submittals and budget developments for the Department of Human Resources. Those departmental budgets are well underway. They're probably submitted.
2020's been completed for months.
So if we knew this, was that part of the submittal to the executive, to DBM from the department in terms of how to fix this from a budgeting perspective? Was there any planning at the budgeting level to account for this so that we can move some of this programming forward, knowing that you have a declining revenue source, knowing that you have important program elements that are not going to be implemented, knowing that our low-income programs are in fact in jeopardy? Did the department submit through its budgetary priorities anything in this regard?
With regard to STEP?
With regard to all of your programs?
Certainly, yeah. I think our
You do.
our entire 2020 budget process was grounded in the fact that we have a new revenue landscape.
So you requested new revenues in the budget?
No, we did not.
Oh.
No, we did not. Although
So you just said we are going to
So in terms of
programs down in 2020 and
no, in terms of controlling administrative costs, in terms of looking at ensuring that in 2020 we can be at a point where we're ensuring that there are dollars in those pots that go toward emergency needs. That was the priority in that process.
So here's my concern. You have important program elements that are at jeopardy. You got a bill that was passed, the legislature once funded. You have other program elements that we've hung our hat on saying these are going to fix and improve the process for Marylanders who get served by these programs. And now all that's at risk, and your budgeting priorities don't seem to reflect that concern. You're giving us the concern, but you have a whole other agency that works with the legislature and the Department of Legislative Services and DBM through the budgeting process that should be working on this directly in terms of where the funding source is going to come from. We can't provide the funding source.
Yeah, I respect that. I understand that. And again, similar to my answer to Commissioner Richard, I think anything you can do to help our office internally, in terms of our own internal bureaucracy and making cases budgetarily, helps.
Yeah, well, we can't. You have to do that on your own as part of your normal job.
Right. Understood.
We can't tell departments how to formulate their budgets. We can certainly, in this
you can help
have some dialogue about it, but we can't help you formulate your budget. That's your own department's function, right?
It's true.
So maybe take some of that into consideration. If there is a real concern, if these Reggie funds, these C funds are going to continue to decline as you predict, I'm not so certain that's the case, but if it is truly the case, then the budgeters need to know that, and the budget processes need to take that into account. And I would highly encourage the Department of Human Resources to formally put that in. Don't depend on the Public Service Commission to do that for you.
I will certainly take that message back and do my best to ensure that that is reflected in every budget process.
Very good. Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning, Commissioner Lynn.
I had a couple of questions about two items. One is the elimination of the June hiatus that you discussed earlier today. That's been an ongoing issue for a while. I'm familiar with the lines wrapping around the buildings in the more unforgiving periods of the year in the summertime. So I'm happy to hear that OHEP's taking some steps to address that. There were concerns back when this issue has been discussed before that there would be some challenges in processing and closing out the old fiscal year, and then at the same time initiating the new fiscal year. Some of those customers that may have applied in June would be immediately re-eligible to apply again in July, just as an example. So has OHEP had a chance to think through those transition issues and how you would address those concerns?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, some of it was certainly, some of the resistance to processing June was just related to administrative burdens internally in terms of trying to close out fiscally, but we were able to resolve a lot of those issues in terms of, not to get too into the weeds, but working with fiscal to establish the right purchase orders at the right time and a lot of that process to track the money properly. With regard to the customers being eligible again, we're taking you're applying in June for the new program year, so we're doing all the legwork in June. We're taking those, we're setting them up, and similar to MEEP, I think you're probably familiar with the way MEEP works. If you apply in July, you can apply for all programs. We don't yet have MEEP benefits established. We haven't received notice. We usually don't receive notice from HHS until November with regard to the state's block grant. So what we do is we enter all that information, we fully process, we line those folks up for a mass certification process once we're aware of what the benefits will be, and we do that in November for MEEP. And so we made a parallel process for EUSP. So essentially in June, you're applying, you're following up. Most people, as you know, don't submit complete applications on the first go. So those weeks are taken to get complete applications. And so what we did was, come the first weeks of July, mass certify all those folks for EUSP, so we're able to just move them in. So they are counted as FY19 applications that came in June. I think there were Office of People's Counsel certainly raised some valid concerns, things we can improve in terms of coordination with utilities around the applications received during that time and whether or not commitments can be made and where those commitments count. I think there's some communication to be improved there between local agencies and utilities. But overall, it's gone fairly smoothly. And as I mentioned, we've already got 23% more applications in the system at this date than we did this time last year, which is a good thing. Those applications would have previously been sitting in a pile, waiting to be entered. So we're ahead of the game.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to hear. I have one other question regarding a proposal that was, or request that was made by the Office of People's Counsel and IEER and responded to by RISA regarding concerns that some of the EUSP or LIHEAP customers are paying more for their commodity costs for electricity over the SOS rate for a particular utility company. Since your office processes all of these requests, determines low-income eligibility for every customer in the state, you're looking at all the bills, your representatives are doing that. I wanted to hear from you if you thought this was a concern the Commission needs to take a look at, or is it a concern for your office?
We've certainly been made aware that other entities have concerns about that issue. We've taken a preliminary look at our data. Unfortunately, we don't track someone's enrollment with a retail supplier or whether they're on SOS. So we have aggregate data in terms of their overall energy expenditures and their usage, but we don't know a rate they're paying at any given time or if they're signed up with a retail supplier. So in terms of the quality of any data that we could have, it's challenged by that lack of tracking who a customer may or may not be signed up with. We would certainly have concerns if in fact any of these, if there's validity to any of this, but we don't have any data that really shows one way or another if that's happening.
Have you had any concerns that average utility bills, notwithstanding the typical reasons for them increasing, such as rate increases or additional usage or things of that sort, but have you noticed that there's been spikes or other issues that might have contributed to increases? This is
another area where it's difficult to necessarily track. So similar to the average benefit, folks comment on our average benefit. There are so many different factors in our benefit matrix. So we look at usage, we look at household size, we look at income and tracking a lot of that. There's a lot of noise in that process, so it's difficult to really see if there's any genuine upward trend in overall energy bills. Another big factor, which I mentioned in our operations plan, which is something we want to get a handle on, is EUSP benefits can be applied to past due amounts, the bill payment amounts alone. So it's difficult often for us to get a true handle on the arrearage situation. We don't know really how much of the bill payment money is going toward past due balances versus being spread out over 12 months as was originally intended. So there's so much noise in that process that it's difficult for us to comment on that as to whether there is any sort of upward trend or downward trend in total bill.
Okay. This time, roughly this time last year, we were here talking about the STEP program and some of the other initiatives that some of the other advocacy organizations were engaged in. One that came to mind was the Fuel Fund. They had some programs that they were implementing, and they had agreed to provide some lessons learned over the course of the last year or two to OHEP and other parties. I was wondering if any of that lessons learned had occurred, if OHEP had an opportunity to gain some understanding about the successes or failures of those initiatives.
I would say generally we're well informed of the Fuel Fund's processes. I'm, of course, a former employee of the Fuel Fund. I know they have a new leader here today. Hopefully he gets the chance to introduce himself. We've certainly been at the Fuel Fund a number of times over the course of the year. I'm pretty well versed in their current successes and past successes with the Watt Watchers programming. They had a terrific study. I think that's probably what we were discussing at that point in time, which we've certainly read thoroughly. And that entire approach was central to where we were going with STEP in terms of the energy education piece, in terms of what approach to behavior change and energy education makes most sense in the context of STEP. So I think we're well versed in their successes and the studies related to the successes that they've had, and Fuel Fund will always be an important partner to our office.
All right, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So there's been some concerns expressed about budget billing and whether that should be part of the process.
Right.
Can you comment on where your office is in relation to that issue?
Certainly. I brought it up last year, specifically in my comments. I didn't this year, although it is in the operations plan. When you look over time, there is a growing gap between those who apply for MEEP for pure heating versus EUSP. Of course, one of the requirements of applying for EUSP is you have to check stating that you will be enrolled in budget billing. And it's more anecdotal than anything, but we do have the growing gap. So it used to have about the same number of applications for both MEEP and EUSP in any given year. That's now gotten up to about a 6% gap. And anecdotally, what we hear from our agencies is the people, even when explained what budget billing is, they don't want it. Even though they're going to get a $500 USP benefit and be enrolled in budget billing, that they're afraid of budget billing. So part of it is an education issue, and we continue to encourage our local agencies to explain what budget billing is. But it remains a fact that a lot of folks who are coming to apply are averse to being enrolled in budget billing, and I think that has resulted in that gap of applications between the two programs.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So you mentioned in discussing the affordability percent of income issue,
Right.
that you seem to suggest that it would be less complicated to have a program that was based on percent of income than based on what you have today. But wouldn't you still have to do the same kind of income eligibility and same kind of
You would.
review?
I think I'm coming fresh off spending some time with a gentleman who ran the energy assistance operation in Ohio for 30 years, and so that's fresh in my mind. But there are ways to structure a percentage of income enrollment in such a way that you can do a much more streamlined redetermination process at a regular basis.
Redetermination.
Right.
Well, isn't that what you're doing now?
So that's what we're doing for seniors, but to do it for a mass of people could be a pretty significant administrative funding. So if you had 100,000 people regularly enrolled in a percentage of income program, and they have a fairly streamlined redetermination process that doesn't require the vast majority of them to come back and submit a full application each and every year, there could be significant administrative savings there. So, a lot of it comes down to the structure of the program, who's administering it, how enrollment takes place, what that redetermination process looks like, what are the timelines for redeterminations. But my sense is that there can be administrative savings and really fewer headaches for customers under the way a lot of percentage of income programs are structured. They're not all the same, they're not all equal, but by and large, I think that opportunity does exist in a way it doesn't with a full application for benefits each and every year.
Why couldn't you do a streamline under the current program is what I'm trying to get to. I don't
Yeah.
understand why you couldn't have the same kind of streamlining process.
I think we can continue to work through that. I mean, I've been here for less than 2 years, and we've been audited 4 times. So, a lot of it comes down to that even getting through a redetermination process for customers whose income doesn't change, whose household status doesn't change, was a bit of a struggle. So I think we can continue to work through that if this initial redetermination process goes through. I think there are other benefits to a percentage of income program as well. It's certainly an accepted way to best target the benefits. If you're constantly targeting to that 6%, or even if you go higher, Whereas we're looking at a 30-day window to give a benefit for the entire year. So there are a number of moving pieces in that determination process. So we certainly can, and I hope to, over the next number of years, move toward more streamlined redetermination processes. But I think part of it is the dream of starting afresh with a new approach, and that you can just build that into the process.
Okay, and do you know how much it would cost to go to a percent of income?
I couldn't venture to give an estimate.
More than the $37 million in universal service?
Well, certainly if you're looking to target, that's part of that discussion, which I think is a broader discussion than just our own office. Are you looking to reach 300,000 versus 100,000 people? What is the end result in that? Because that's ultimately the driver of cost, right? Is the number of people you're targeting for enrollment. So that's the major factor in there, and that's why I think that's a bit of a bigger conversation than just our offices.
Sure. So are you targeting for 100,000, or are you targeting for 360,000?
We do as much outreach as we can. We're certainly, as you can see in our MFRs, our Managing for Results, targeting vulnerable populations first and foremost. We've, as I mentioned in my comments, we've settled into this post-recession, or slightly under 100,000. That seems to be where we are right now. If we reduce denial rates somewhat, we'll be delivering benefits to slightly over 100,000. Mm-hmm. That seems to, we've found some equilibrium there. I don't know why necessarily, but it's at a time where certainly households receiving food benefits and other benefits has declined and sort of has settled into a steady pace. So we don't necessarily target 100,000, but that seems to be where we've been and where we are.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman, for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Any final questions? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next up, we'll have Director of Housing and Building Energy Programs, Mr. Joseph Seehusen, associated with the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, for giving me an opportunity to address the Commission today. I'm kind of at the end of a summer cold, so we'll see how I do today. But I'm Joe Seehusen. I'm Director of Housing and Building Energy Programs at the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. I'm also joined by my colleague Julia Kalas, who's a Senior Program Manager with us in Housing and Building Energy Programs. So a little background on what we've done and what we do. In addition to some loan programs, our division is responsible for statewide weatherization from the U.S. Department of Energy. That's the Weatherization Assistance Program, the DOE WAP program. Also the Empower Low-Income Energy Efficiency Program, LIHEAP, and the Empower Multifamily Energy Efficiency and Affordability Program, the MEHA. DHCD regularly engages with OHEP, both for providing crises no heat repairs and in client management for weatherization. And we are grateful for the leadership and collaboration with Bill Freeman and his team at DHS. As a complement to the programs outlined in the Department of Human Services FY 2019 Proposed Operations Plan, weatherization plays an essential role in addressing energy affordability in Maryland. Weatherization works to create a long-lasting reduction in energy costs for limited income families. So we support the proposal from OHEP and the Office of the People's Counsel to create a working group or a similar effort to look into energy affordability goals and performance and the efficacy of the suite of energy programs for limited income households, of which weatherization is a part. As a department, we seek to understand the gaps in our coverage in the efficient use of various fund sources. As an example, we've observed gaps or missed opportunities in emergency cooling services, funding for full weatherization in oil and propane households, health and safety repairs, and funding for energy measures that do not meet savings to investment ratio requirements but are beneficial to the homeowner. Targeted and enhanced weatherization is an eligible use of the unexpended EUSP funds. Although the FY 2019 operations plan for EOSP has not proposed to use these funds for enhanced weatherization, we wanted to take an opportunity to note the importance of enhanced weatherization in general. The department ran an enhanced weatherization program with grant funding from the Customer Investment Fund as part of the merger of Constellation and Exelon from the end of FY 2015 to FY 2018. We used a network of contractors in the BGE territory outside of Baltimore City to weatherize over 400 households that would have been unable to obtain services from Empower or DOE Weatherization Assistance Program. And we started evaluating this program. Look forward to sharing with you more information at a future SIF and Empower hearings on the results. Closing, again, I'd like to thank DHS for its ongoing excellent collaboration with DHCD, from which both agencies work together to achieve our goals. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Let me ask you, do you currently participate in the advisory panel that Mr. Freeman mentioned DEP has?
We might be on the list. Bill would have to affirm, but historically I think we are.
Okay. And as you heard me inquire earlier with regards to whether or not that advisory board could substitute in place of a PC 27 type work group, I imagine you would be interested in participating fully in this advisory board?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Seehusen, you heard the exchange I had with Mr. Freeman regarding budget priorities, and I take it you heard that. Does DHCD have similar efforts underway to make sure you get the weatherization funding that you need through both the budgetary processes in the executive branch and the legislative budgetary processes?
As you know, of course, there's a great deal of weatherization that takes place through Empower and DOE. Julie, do you have any comments on that as well?
I do not.
Okay. This particular, our particular commentary is geared towards enhanced weatherization, and that's the project that we, and under Julia's leadership, finished with the SIF program, which we came away from that feeling very positive and optimistic of the profound impact it had on a substantial number of households. And we have that capacity, and that capacity is still standing. And so where there's funding, and we're looking at some different options, but don't have anything specific at this point.
So I bring it up for what to me are obvious reasons, which are that the departments, the various agencies of the executive branch need to advocate for their program funding up through their own chains of command, and work with the legislature as well to make sure that these programs are funded appropriately. I think you will find a very sympathetic ear. I know from my 22 years in the legislature that you will, in the legislature, and I think that the administration has this as a priority too. But if at this level of programming, if you're not pushing those priorities at your level up the hill in your own departments and through your legislative liaisons and through the budgeting processes of both DBM and DLS, then you're probably not going to get adequate funding for the programs. Those who ask receive. Those who don't ask probably won't, because you have limited resources. So I just put that out there as a general kind of reminder. Don't forget, we can't give you any funding. We do not have that capability. But other portions of government can. We simply oversee the implementation of these program plans.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly follow up. I've been very interested in this, the idea and the importance of DHR and OHEP working, DHCD and OHEP working closely together in collaboration. I think there's an opportunity to really make those ratepayer funds go a lot further and more efficiently. Do you have any statistics on the number of OHEP clients that are in fact working with DHCD to engage in weatherization programs?
I don't have the exact numbers, but I think it's fair to say that approximately the majority of the individuals that come to us come from OHEP. I think that's a fair statement. Certainly some come through different channels, but OHEP is, I would say, the primary source of the individuals we serve.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And by chance, kind of just the metrics. I mean, when you get a pre-weatherized OHEP client, and then after, weatherization, the kind of savings that that are observed again for these programs that are ratepayer supported.
I don't have the exact number, but when we get so the pre-approved OHEP individuals that come to us, and after we've weatherized through a broad spectrum of programs, I would say the number would be $400 annually and up, and depending upon, and I'm not referring to the enhanced weatherization if you've got any ideas on that, but our more standard weatherization, $400 savings annually could be reasonably expected.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So I'm encouraged to hear about this collaboration between your two departments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Seahuse.
Thank you so very much.
Next up, we'll have state utilities that would like to make any presentation, including Baltimore Gas and Electric and PEPCO or any others. Thank you. If you could please make an appearance.
Good morning, Chairman. Kim Curry, representing Baltimore Gas and Electric Company.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Matthew Seegers appearing for PEPCO and Delmarva Power.
Thank you, Ms. Curry.
As for BGE, I don't have anything to add to our written comments. I did want to just say one brief, just a few words about OPC's proposal. They've requested data from the utilities regarding what low-income customers are paying on retail supply vis-a-vis SOS. They've asked for data regarding how much bill payment assistance is going to arrearages. And if the Commission is inclined to grant OPC's request for the data, we would just think it would be more beneficial to have a separate conversation on that. Kind of given that one of the things that could come out of this data would be a significant change to how energy assistance is distributed. So just having another conversation and really understanding the type of data that they're looking for, I think would be helpful.
Do you believe you currently have that data, or do you not have enough clarity with respect to what the data is?
There is not enough clarity. So, for example, if OPC is seeking the retail rate, what the supplier gives us is just a total rate. So say, for example, there's a customer charge included in that rate. So they've added the commodity rate plus a $5 customer charge. We're not going to see the rate separate from that separate from that customer charge. So all we'd be able to give them is that total rate. So to the extent they're looking for the exact commodity charge, we might not have that data. If they're looking for 12 months, what if a customer switches suppliers throughout the year and they're looking for what that customer paid with one particular supplier? So are we looking at a snapshot? Are we looking at 12 months? So kind of understanding things like that would be helpful.
There are a lot of variables. I actually just switched from NRG to Constellation last month, and Constellation gave me a $100 gift card. So factoring all these into the price to compare is not easy. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that $100, but I could probably buy a mini fridge. Thank you, Ms. Curry. Mr. Seegers, do you have anything to add beyond?
Could I ask Ms. Curry?
Oh, please, yeah.
Ms. Curry, with respect to the arrearage amount, I mean, is that able? I'm not sure, and I'll ask OPC this question, but with respect to the budget billing and the way the budget billing rolls in the arrearage and then the expected charges and everything else, so that there could be arrearages being paid, throughout the year because it's rolled into the budget billing. Is that something that the company is able to figure out, really? I mean, it's quite a challenge, it seems.
Yes, because that one we might have to touch every low-income customer's bill, because every customer is going to have a different arrearage level. So to the extent we're applying bill payment assistance to a customer who has their arrearages and their current charges rolled into one, that's going to differ from customer to customer. We have 45,000 customers on EUSP, and it almost sounds, just kind of looking at how OPC has characterized the data that they want, that we would have to look at each customer's bill, and possibly for 12 months. So again, understanding exactly the scope of the data and figuring out whether or not that's an efficient way to gather the data. That's why I just think there would need to be greater conversation around that.
And with respect to the supplier information that OPC is seeking, is there anything in the supplier tariff that might prevent the companies from providing data on supplier costs or supplier charges?
If it's specific rates, the way I understood OPC's request, though, was for aggregate information, in which case it wouldn't be isolated, and I don't want to speak for OPC. But if it's specific rates from a supplier, there is a provision in the supplier coordination tariff that prevents disclosure of that information to third parties.
Right, so if it's aggregated, perhaps not.
Perhaps not, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question, since both companies commented on the application of the 55-day extensions and OHEP's proposal to revise that process. Without getting too far into the weeds on how it would actually work, I'm curious as to, the companies both supported the revision or the proposed change, but how are we going to implement this? Are the companies prepared to continue with normal collection action upon receipt of a report from OHEP? There's clearly going to be some billing cycles there that are going to cross with how the 55-day report comes from OHEP. So, it's not going to be a, Monday you get the report, Tuesday's back to normal kind of process. So how are you planning on implementing that?
Yeah, that's something we would have to examine logistically, how that could occur. Because, as you mentioned, there might be some sort of, collection processes behind the scenes that still have to play their way out. From an IT perspective, I don't know what it takes to kind of stop that process and start that again, and how long that would take. So it would be definitely something we would have to consider logistically, how that would work.
And my answer, Commissioner Litton, would be along the same lines. It's something that has not entirely been worked out yet. The primary point we wanted to make in our comments is that we supported the changes to the 55-day hold because we believe that would reduce the amount of arrearages that build up while the 55 days is running. In terms of how the logistics work, I echo Ms. Curry's comments that is something that we would certainly need to work out, and we were certainly willing to work out.
Okay, so that's something that I guess could be worked out as part of the company's participation in work groups that the Office of Home Energy Programs may sponsor in the future.
Yes, if there are such work groups established or any existing work groups, okay. Yes.
Certainly.
Thank you.
I just want to also follow up on this, the information gathering and the concerns the company had. The way I guess I understood the OPC recommendation is just simply that, just to gather the information, to understand, as far as, at this point we're differentiating the bill support program and the arrearage program. It sounds like this is actually very blurred in many senses. I mean, if the company is first taking the arrearage out of the bill support, that is largely then an arrearage program. So you made the comment that if we were to try to get this data, that somehow that would have a major change to the overall program. Could you explain what you meant by that? And is it that difficult just to go ahead and supply the information just for the purposes of understanding how it's working?
I was not objecting to providing the data. I was just saying there should be a further conversation. When I talked about significant change, I meant in the context of, so for example, if OPC wants to use the data, this is the aggregate data on retail supply charges. If one of the recommendations is that customers who are with suppliers that have rates higher than SOS, they would have to be shifted back to SOS. If that were a recommendation coming out of their analysis of the data, that's what I mean by significant changes. I don't know that to be the case, but that's look like what in other the other states that OPC referenced in there. It looked like that was kind of one of the things that they were looking at. So that's what I meant. Have that bigger conversation if we're talking about something that ultimately could result in a very large change to the.
Okay, so you were just looking ahead.
Yes.
Do your knowledge, and I mean, probably there's no reason you would know this, but did these other states, New York, Massachusetts, actually go through that type of an analysis of the retail supply cost versus their standard offer service equivalents?
Again, not objecting to it. Just I want to understand, kind of make sure we're gathering accurate data and we're doing it in an efficient way. So not objecting to the ask.
Okay.
Just want to understand a little bit more about it and have that conversation about what data exists today and what forms. Is it really the best, most efficient way, at least with regard to their request for bill payment information? Is it really the best way to get that data to look at 45,000 customers' bills over a 12-month period of time? Let's discuss ways we could gather this data in a more efficient way.
And
That's all I was
what
saying.
form would you be suggesting that this conversation take place in?
Yeah, I would leave that up to the commission. Is it a work group? Is it something else? I was just saying in the context of this proceeding, which is about OHEP's proposed operations plan, it just seems like it's an add-on. It's a pretty big ask and a pretty big kind of thing that they're looking at to just be an add-on to OHEP's proposed operations plan proceeding. That's the point I was trying to
Just
make.
again, so I'm understanding, it'll be a huge add-on just to get the information, or the resulting policies that could come out of this?
The resulting
Okay, so-
policies.
So,
yes.
but simply collecting the data is not the issue with the
I
company.
want to understand more about what they would like. So remember
Well-
I had mentioned earlier, do they want the retail charge or do they want just the commodity rate? If they want just the commodity rate, then we don't have an easy way to get that. But I need to understand if that's what OPC is looking for, or we can tell them, hey, this is what we have, OPC. That's what I'm talking about in terms of the conversation.
Okay,
If
just the
we're
way
just
things
having
work
a
here
back-
is sometimes we create the group, and then another year goes by, and then we see where we are. I just wonder if there's something simple that we might consider here. If it's just saying we would be interested in this type of data, and then we can see where it goes as far as policy. That could take a number of years if anything moves. But simply getting the data. Am I hearing again correctly that the companies have no problem with, once they kind of understand exactly what the data is, just providing it?
Yeah,
Did
there's
I
no
hear
problem with
okay.
that, but like I said, understanding what it is and what we have. So,
Okay,
for example, if
right,
the demand is they want the actual rate, we might not have that, but we might have something else. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Okay, fair enough. But you may have some data that could be
That
useful
could
to
be
what.
useful.
Okay,
Yes.
and then the same with the arrearage type of information. What amount of the bill support is going toward arrearage? Is that again data that's available? Don't even consider where we might be going or the recommendations might be going with that data, but the utilities could provide that data.
Again, I would have to. The only thing I'd like to know is are there easier ways to gather it? So, is it really a good idea to have an employee dedicated to looking at 45,000 customers' bills over a 12-month period of time, or is there some other way we can get the same kind of data that doesn't involve that? So those are the types of questions I would want to know. Let's do this efficiently. Like I said, it's a lot that it could be a heavy lift depending on what the ask is, but let's understand first whether or not that's the best way to get the data.
Okay. Fair enough. I just was trying to figure out if there's something without, again, waiting an entire year to then come back to the same question that could happen. If there was agreement, then again, between the parties, if the data could be collected through a potential language in this order.
Well, you say agreement with the parties, that's the thing. There hasn't been a discussion among the parties. It was a comment that was made in OPC's comment, so it's been fairly unilateral. That's what I was speaking of in terms of the conversation, as opposed to having this unilateral, utilities get this information without really understanding our systems and what we already have and what we can provide. seems like it would be more beneficial to talk that through. And that was really my only point.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Curry, Mr. Seegers. Mr. Seegers, do you have anything further to add?
Just very briefly, Mr. Chairman, if I may. First of all, good morning once again. As with BGE, PHI does not have anything to add to its written comments. We are generally supportive of OHEP's proposed plan. We also just would like to note a few items concerning OPC's recommendation in terms of the information that the utilities it's requesting the utilities provide. First of all, the recommendation that the electric companies provide OHEP with the level of the bill payment assistance, those benefits that are being used to initially pay an existing arrearages rather than future electric bills. This information actually is already available to OHEP through PHI's agency portal. What the agency portal is that it allows any registered agency like OHEP to register specific customers whereby they will be given access to that customer's billing information. And OHEP can see, they can see the billing information. Specifically, it will be 12 months of payments and balances, the amount of the current bill, and they are able to do a calculation that will allow them to show the amount of a payment that is going towards an arrearage. It's something that we may have to help them with in terms of showing them how to make the calculation, but we are certainly happy to do that. But that information is available through the portal. Unfortunately, we do not right now have an easy way to provide this information on an aggregated level. We only have it on an individual customer by customer basis. So if we were to try and provide this on an aggregated level, as with BGE, it would require us to go through each customer, and we have about 28,200 customers between Pepco and Delmarva receiving the bill payment assistance. And we would have to develop an automated program to run the necessary query, and that would entail a cost. Concerning the provision of the data related to retail suppliers, in terms of the number of EUSP customers receiving electric supply from a supplier, again, we do have this information on an individual customer basis. As of right now, we don't have an easy way to run an automated query. This would have to be developed, and once again, there would be a cost with that. The total aggregate amount customers paid in the retail supply charges, that would, again, be a manual search, or if we were to develop an automated function, there would be a cost with that. Also, I would note that for customers that are dual billed, we would not have that information, because for customers who are dual billed, we don't get the rate from the supplier. So that goes straight to the customer. So we would only be able to provide that information for customers who are on the consolidated bills. And finally, for the total aggregate amount that those customers would have paid for default SOS service from the utility, a customer currently has the ability to go onto the Pepco and Delmarva Power website and use our price to compare tool to show what they would be paying under SOS versus a current offering that they are looking at. So customers currently have this ability. Also, as Ms. Curry referenced before, Pepco and DPL, we may not be able to provide this because of we are what is called bill ready as opposed to rate ready, in the sense that we simply take the amount, the price amount that the retail supplier provides to us, and we put that on a customer's bill. And there could be things other than just the commodity rate included in that rate. There could be other add-ons. It could be a budget amount. So it's not something that we could. The commodity rate is not something that we could easily extract from that amount. So it's not something that we may be able to provide. And once again, for customers that are dual billed, we would not be able to provide that information. So we just wanted to point that out, and we echo that these are concerns that are probably better addressed in another venue or another proceeding. So, but we did want to note those concerns with OPC's recommendations.
Thank you.
I guess I just asked the same question. I mean, are you willing to be, Pepco, Delmarva, willing to be part of this conversation, I guess, with OPC, I imagine staff and other parties to arrive at, is it valuable information or not? And this is, everyone would agree if there are all these costs, whether it's worth going forward.
Of course, we're certainly willing. We just wanted to note that these are our current capabilities. And if we were asked to provide more information than what we are currently able to do, there would be a cost associated with it. And as you noted, Commissioner, I guess it would come down to, okay, is comparing the cost to the value of the data, is it worth it?
Okay, great. Well, I thought it was I always take OPC's recommendation seriously, as we should, and they
As
look
do
out
we.
for the interest of the ratepayers. So, again, I just wanted to find out if this conversation could take place, and we see where it takes you. Thank you.
Of course.
At this point, we will take a short break. We'll be back in the room, according to that clock, at 11:50. My intent is to wrap up by about 1 o'clock, right before lunch today. We will begin with the Retail Electric Supplier Association. Are they in the hearing room today? They are, starting at 11:50. Thank you. Okay, we are back on the record. Our first witness is the Retail Electric Supply Association.
Yeah, good morning. Eric Wallace on behalf of the Retail Energy Supply Association, and good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. RISA filed comments last Thursday and responded specifically to the issue raised in OPC and the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research in their comments. Their comments were filed on July 24th, and they had, in those comments, they requested that the Commission direct the utilities to report aggregated pricing information comparing supplier prices to standard offer service and sales service prices. And as RISA addressed in its comments, RISA has several concerns about that request and the data that would be provided and the manner in which it would be provided. The first concern is that competitive supplier prices are not directly comparable to standard offer service and sales service prices. And RISA gave several examples in the comments of some of those important differences. Absent a full unbundling, SOS and sales service prices are structured differently than sales or than competitive supplier pricing. They reflect the wholesale supply costs as well as administratively determined adders, but they do not reflect all of the services and related costs that a supplier incurs in order to provide its competitive supply service. And then the price alone also is not directly comparable to the sales service price, and the pricing data requested doesn't provide a full picture of the product or service that a customer may be purchasing from their competitive supplier. And some examples include a long-term fixed price product where a customer may choose to go for budget certainty, may choose to go with a supplier and purchase a long-term fixed price product of up to 36 months. In RISA's comments, we included several. We looked at the Commission's shopping website and gathered some data there to look at the different offerings that are available in the market and how those compare to the utility SOS price to compare in the BGE, Delmarva, Pepco, and Potomac Edison service territories. And one of the issues that dovetails with this is the timing. If you were to collect the data, a snapshot in time would not tell the full picture of a particular product. And we, in the discussion earlier this morning, there's some discussion about whether the data would be for 6 months or a year or how long, and really to get a full picture of how supplier prices compare over time to default service prices. You would have to look at as long of a time period as possible to see what the trends are and what may be happening in the market and where we're headed. And in addition to long-term fixed price products, there are many different value-added products and services that are now bundled into supplier offerings. For example, a customer may choose a product that includes a smart thermostat or other enabling technology that allows them to manage their energy usage, and that energy efficiency may lead to a lower usage and a lower overall bill. But if you just looked at their commodity rate, that benefit wouldn't be reflected there. And yet another example, there are various different types of products that have cashback, rebates, grocery coupons or discounts. Chairman used the example of a gift card earlier, and those types of benefits are very important to a customer shopping decision and would also not be reflected in a pure aggregate price comparison as requested by OPC. So as the general premise that you would collect this data and be able to make a meaningful decision based on that data, I mean, RISA is very concerned that that would not be the case. And so RISA's recommendation is that the utilities, the Commission, and other stakeholders focus on customer education, retail market enhancements to enable customers, whether they be receiving energy assistance or not, to be able to go out into the marketplace, find the best product that meets their individual needs, and then take advantage of that opportunity. And importantly, cost savings is available in the marketplace. And in RISA's comments, we provided some data that looked at what cost savings are available out there, and it's pretty compelling data. I mean, we showed that in the BGE service territory, there are 20 electricity supply offerings as of August, 18 of which are fixed price offerings, and all 20 of those offerings are below the SOS rate. So any customer that is taking SOS is, by definition, paying more than they have to for their energy because they're not going into the marketplace and taking advantage of one of those 20 different offerings that are posted on the Commission's website. And the same holds true for Delmarva and for Pepco and for Potomac Edison. And to really provide a clear picture or an example, RISA did an example showing for over 6 months, if a customer were to pick the lowest available price in the BG service territory today and remain on that price for 6 months, if all of BG's customers that are not yet shopping were to do that, in the aggregate, they would save $41 million, $328,317 over that 6 months period. And so this really reinforces RISA's concern, which is that we need to be focusing on how do we get more customers engaged in the competitive marketplace, get them informed about what offers are out there and the savings that may be available, particularly the energy assistance customers that may be on the edge of needing assistance, and if they were able to find that, lock in that lower rate, they may not need to come and seek energy assistance in order to keep their bills paid. And so I think that's a critical opportunity. And I know that in PC 44 and in the ARM 62 proceeding, we've started looking at some of the different market enhancements that can be done to help grow the market. And I believe that enhancements to the Commission's shopping website are part of an upcoming phase of that work group. And we think that's a really critical piece of this, because if we can update the Commission's website, make that data more accessible, easier to find, and get that data out to more customers, and maybe partnering with different agencies to help customers get to the website to find that information, that presents a great opportunity to help customers to locate these offers and to take advantage of them and to find the best offer that is going to meet their needs. And there's one additional issue that's a big concern for RISA as well, and that's the confidentiality of the commercially sensitive pricing data that OPC's requested. And in the past, the Commission has recognized that supplier pricing, customer counts, and those type of market data is commercially sensitive. And so one of RISA's underlying concerns here is how this data is going to be collected, how it's going to be presented and made accessible to various parties and to the public, and whether or not that would make its way into competitors' hands. And so that's sort of an underlying issue that is critical for RISA as well. And so sort of the overall conclusion from RISA is that rather than go down a path of incurring the cost, as the utilities have explained, to gather this data over whatever period of time, understanding that the data isn't going to provide the information that would be necessary to make a decision, that rather than head down that course, that those resources should instead be focused on the initiatives that are underway to enhance the Commission's shopping website, to continue to enhance the competitive market and make more and more competitive offers available to the Maryland customers that that are not yet shopping, or that may be shopping and are not aware of a better offer that's out there.
Mr. Wallace, so your supplier's pricing obviously would be competitive sensitive, but OPC, as I understand it, they're asking for the pricing that the customer is paying. Is that pricing information also sensitive?
Yeah, I think that the pricing that the customers pay if they're shopping, that's the price they're being charged by their supplier, and so that information is competitively sensitive. It's just sort of whether you're getting it from the customer's perspective or the supplier's perspective.
Is that pricing not public, though, such as the price to compare?
That pricing is public for a snapshot in time. So like on the Commission's shopping website, there are lists of offers that are available there, right? But when you aggregate that data and you present it over a long period of time, and you also match it up with customer counts for who's enrolled in what products, then that becomes very commercially sensitive, and that is not publicly available.
I guess actually good afternoon, 12:01. So thank you for being here today. I mean, when this issue came up, and it was good that your organization is being represented. I guess I just want to ask the question, are you concerned about what's happened in New York and Massachusetts, and do you think the getting this information could be useful in maybe setting the record straight, or maybe coming up with policies that ensure that we do just exactly what you're talking about, is make sure we have the right products for low income, and that we get the proper education out there. So again, I guess there's a concern, of what's happening. I think we're already on that path. And then what do we do about it as far as getting the information? And we are, again, talking about aggregate information, and I think we want to strip out. The suggestion is you strip out the proprietary.
Yeah, it's a great question. So from RISA's perspective, what's happening in New York and Massachusetts, and the analysis that underlies some of the decisions that are being made, particularly in New York, RISA believes is very flawed. All right, and in the Massachusetts report, they acknowledge they only looked at the purely the price, and they didn't take a look behind it to see what is the underlying product that customer is being served on. And so, for all of the reasons that I was talking about before, you can't just look at the commodity price, even if the utilities were able to get that data.
And I agree with all that. I understand what you're saying there. But again, as far as setting the record straight, how, or I guess getting the correct information to get to where you're talking about, providing those policies that offer the products, the appropriate products for these for low-income EUSP type customers.
Yeah, well, I think from our perspective, we've already done that in part in our comments. That we said, well, let's look at what's happening in the marketplace, and we can see that there are many offers available below the standard offer service rate, and so I think that gives us the information we need to know that customer education and getting that information to customers is key here, because those products and services are out in the market, and in a competitive market, suppliers are going to have a variety of different offers. So it's about empowering the customers to know what's out there and to make a decision to get the right product for them. And that is a decision that they make regularly. It's an ongoing process. And so, that I think that customer education and the initiatives that the Commission and other stakeholders can do to get this information before customers needs to be an ongoing process as well. And that, updates like, redoing the Commission shopping website, getting the gas data on there, that those go a long way to providing sort of a centralized hub that customers can go to get this information. But the idea that you're going to look at even aggregate data like that and be able to make a meaningful decision, we just think that premise is entirely off base. And my understanding is that in Massachusetts that there was a legislative hearing on this, and that that they didn't get any traction with any legislation coming out of that. And New York is a fundamentally different market from Maryland. They don't have the Electric Choice Act that we have here, and their shopping is a creature of the Commission up there. And I'm not entirely familiar with all the details of New York, but I do know that from looking at some of the different orders that they look at shopping as part of their jurisdiction to regulate the reasonableness of rates that customers are charged. And that is a different market structure than we have here in Maryland, where the Commission or the General Assembly deregulated supplier pricing. And so taking steps in a direction to look at how that, I think there might be some legislative changes that would need to be made if there were going to be steps made in that direction anyway. So,
just would you comment on, are there certain products, if one is receiving and participating in an EUSP type of program, public assistance type of program, that should not be offered or should not be provided? For instance, the $100 gift card, because particularly if it involved a much higher than SOS commodity price, because there could be, if someone is in a situation where they are financially in need, could be they find that very attractive, but at the same time, that does put a cost on all the ratepayers then to continue to provide the assistance. I mean, would you agree that maybe there are products that are not appropriate?
I think that there are an array of products in the market, and different types of customers are going to be a better fit for different types of products. But I'm hesitant to say that there's any particular type of product that's not the right fit for a particular customer, because the market evolves over time. And if we take steps to restrict which customers can purchase which offerings, we don't know what's going to be in the market in the next 10 to 15 years. And there are a lot of initiatives now to utilize smart meter data and more innovative rate designs and things like that. And if we say, that, for example, the customers can only, if you're receiving benefits, you could only enroll in a, fixed price product at a certain level, then, what happens if the market continues to evolve and there be other products that would be a better fit are on the market, and these customers have been, sort of preemptively precluded from accessing those products, even though they would be better off if they were able to have the freedom to choose the best product for their individual circumstances. And so, I think that that brings us back to the what's the right step forward here, and I think it really is customer education and letting the market work, and as more customers are shopping, we'll get more and more competitive pricing and more innovative offerings, and that by empowering customers to identify when they're not on the best product for them, whether that be SOS or a supplier price we're offering that's when there's something better in the market, and I think that's where we need to focus to make this market work as effectively as it can, and to bring the benefits of the market to as many customers in Maryland as we possibly can.
Okay, probably this is a yes/no question. If there were to be a conversation had with OPC about the type, gathering aggregate information, would RISA and its members be willing to be a part of that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, RISA wants to make this market work. We're committed to Maryland, and we've been here, involved in all of the various commission proceedings to help develop the market, and we'll continue to do so. So I think absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Just briefly, what goes on what's publicly available on the Commission's website, on the suppliers' websites? What kind of information is publicly available?
Yes, so on the Commission's shopping website, you can go plug in your service territory, your monthly usage, and then it'll spit up, come back with results with all of the different offers that are posted there, and it'll give you an estimate. So if you are using 1,000 kilowatt hours a month, which is what RISA did for its examples and its comments, it'll show you, what the different types of products are. Is it a fixed? Is it a variable? Are there, there's a little bit of room to put in some information about whether it's a green product or there are other incentives.
Is there room on? Is there information about, say, gift cards or toasters or whatever
Yes.
else might be available?
There's limited information. So there's a box where you can put information about incentives or rebates or other things like that may be part of that product.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
So I think it's this, first of all, thank you for being here this morning. I appreciate that RISA was able to provide some comments. It was good to hear from the supplier community on this issue. I think that there's been just one of the challenges of dealing with the deregulated market created, and where EUSP was created through the deregulation back in '99. It creates a challenge for analyzing data as to whether or not this type of issue is here as a problem, because OHEP deals primarily with crisis-related situations. So the challenge that the consumer is dealing with at the time they approach OHEP has occurred over a period of time that's already passed. The data that RISA has provided as part of its comments looks today going forward. So any analysis or data that we look at is not going to really, the data that's on our website today is great. I'm glad to see that there's a number of prices that are below SOS. But for those customers that are facing crisis situations now, that is helpful information, assuming they can resolve the outstanding problem, but it's not going to help them resolve the outstanding problem. So I guess it brings us back to the primary question. I mean, certainly RISA represents a number of very active suppliers. NEMA's not here today. There's another organization that represents others that are active. But Maryland has got quite a few licensed suppliers here that are not in any organization. So based on your experience and the issues that you've seen as you've moved through the marketplace, have you seen this as being a challenge, as being a problem? It may not be for all of RISA's members, but we've clearly been hearing anecdotal evidence that there are some customers that are paying more for their commodity. I don't think that we've heard this from a number of different parties even today, So I don't think that that's something that's just, I won't say being made up, but it's not something that's not true at some level. But at the same time, there's, as we've already heard today, a number of different issues that goes into that pricing and how it actually comes about. So how pervasive do you think this challenge really is?
I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, so suppliers don't necessarily know which of their customers are receiving energy assistance benefits. So from the supplier's perspective, it's not clear, and suppliers are prohibited from discriminating against different customers. So they want to treat all customers equally and make their offerings available across the market to every customer, so that they have a chance to benefit from that the energy offerings that they bring to the marketplace. The notion that there are some customers that are paying more than they need to for their energy, I think in any competitive market there's going to be an array of different offerings, and that's why we need to focus on how to get the information to customers to make the best shopping decision. And I think one of the most compelling pieces of data that RISA included in its comments is to show that given that a majority of customers are not shopping today, all of those customers are paying more than they need to. If they were only concerned about price, the best place to get the most competitive price is in the competitive market. It's not on default service. So, and I think that by empowering customers to shop and to lower their price or to find a different energy product that better meets their needs, I think that can help going into the future to prevent customers from needing to turn to energy assistance programs because they'll be better able to manage their energy usage and also to find a better price in the marketplace.
So you mentioned in your answer that suppliers obviously can't discriminate. They have to, as a market, they can do it geographically, but not for economic reasons. So if are suppliers sensitive to the fact that some consumers, and certainly in geographically, you know that there are some regions of the state that are more challenged from an income perspective than others. Are they sensitive to the fact that there may be customers there that would be more impacted by an increase in their commodity price than customers that perhaps are more capable of handling an increase because they wanted the gift card or they wanted to buy a renewable product or something of that sort?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for all suppliers, but I think it's fair to say that suppliers are interested in. They spend a lot of money marketing and developing products and bringing them to the marketplace. And once they have a customer who's enrolled with them, they don't want the customer to leave and have a bad experience. They don't want to have them telling other potential customers that they had a bad experience. So the incentive from the competitive marketplace on suppliers is to make customers happy and to get them the best products and services that they can. And so that incentive, encourages them over time to be working with their customers, responding to their needs, understanding what their concerns are, shifting the different types of products that they offer in the marketplace as customer preferences change, as technology changes. So I think that suppliers absolutely are sensitive to the needs of customers, and that's how they're competitive in the marketplace.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace.
Thank you.
Next up, we will have the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I appreciate this opportunity to make some comments before you. You have the comments that Laura Peltier and I submitted already. Let me first of all say we really appreciate the work that OHEP is doing. It's desperately needed by a large number of Marylanders, and they do relieve a lot of suffering by the assistance programs that we have and that you oversee. I was also very heartened to hear from Mr. Freeman that they are putting some streamlined processes into place to reduce the number of denials, and a lot of people have the same information. And I was a little educated by the kind of challenges, Commissioner Herman, when you asked why can't we do this for everybody, that that OHEP faces in kind of generalizing that streamlined procedure. And you know, we all wish that the procedure would be more streamlined because a lot of people do face quite a lot of challenges. So I'm glad to hear that the rate of denial is going down. Before I get into the retail suppliers issue, I'd like to make a comment on some of the discussion regarding PC 27. Commissioner Linton knows that the first time I met him, I think I made a presentation about the Affordable Energy Program and the wonderful work that the Commission staff and OPC did during PC 27 and their recommendation. I also want to note that a lot of my own work investigating and researching the affordability issue centered on one of the decisions you made in regard to the Empower program, a decision I really admire and respect, which is in respect of energy efficiency, that non-energy benefits should be factored into the overall cost-benefit decision. And after that decision came out, I actually abandoned my plans to publish my energy justice work imminently and stepped back and tried to assess what non-energy benefits from affordability could be. I think at least Commissioner Linton is aware of that work, and I just want to make you aware of it, that I did quite a lot of work trying to figure out how many people become homeless based on the NIATA surveys and national work. We don't actually have Maryland-specific data. But a fair number of people become homeless because of rent energy bill conflicts or mortgage energy bill conflicts, at least according to national data. In Baltimore, 7,500 people were evicted just in 2016. To my calculations, probably about 10% of low-income renters. It's About 2/3 of the people wind up with friends and family with unknown cost to the various parties. About 1/3, maybe 30% wind up actually homeless in shelters. And by a minimal cost estimate of what shelters might be, and the added emergency room visits caused by homelessness, my very rough estimate was per homelessness event, the public costs, not the cost to the family themselves, loss of income and all that, loss of job, loss of school, are about $28,000. There's a big plus or minus delta on that, I'll admit. It's an uncertain estimate, but it's a lot of money. It's 50 times more than the average EUSP assistance. So I think if you factor in the regard to the decisions about PC 27, reopening it, what OHEP's advisory committee might consider, I would strongly recommend that the very reasoning you apply to non-energy benefits for the Empower program actually also applies to, we should see what the social benefits, society would benefit a lot. Landlords would collect rent more regularly, utilities get their bills paid more, certainly arrearages would certainly go down, homelessness would go down. So that's a huge area of PC 27. That was an area that hadn't been investigated last time, and I would strongly recommend that whatever the venue for consideration, that affordability should consider the very vast. I also would make a recommendation that we do know what the costs are in New Jersey. I don't have them handy now, but the numbers that I've seen from another publication that is in draft form don't indicate that the costs will be huge, because the savings are huge. So, maybe utility save. I don't know why the costs of New Jersey don't appear to be low, but I can't vouch that they are low because I've seen them in somebody else's draft publication. But I really do think that the Commission staff should collect that data from the states that do have percentage of income payment programs and compare them to what we're spending. Regarding third-party supply, Laura Peltier, a journalist, and I, she was here, unfortunately had to leave, are working together. There is definitely information that people are paying more, low-income people are paying more. And that overall, she downloaded EIA data Energy Information Administration data that totaled $188 million in larger payments from 2013 to 2016, because Energy Information Administration collects this electricity data. That's apart from natural gas excess payments. So I appreciate all these arguments about, you get $100 and, you get green renewable energy certificates that somebody might buy from Texas or wherever they buy them. Texas REC prices are currently, or last time I looked anyway, were about 50 cents a REC. Not a prince's ransom, I would suggest. And I do think that there is a great value in collecting this data. Commissioner Richards, I really appreciated, the question and answer that you went through today in that regard, because as Mr. Freeman testified, we're facing a pretty big gap in funds going forward. If it is true that there are large excess payments from I'm primarily interested in low income. What's happening to EUSB recipients? How can we expand the 100,000 to a larger number who are eligible, the outreach? But focusing on this particular issue, there is a number, whether it's higher or not, on average, are low-income assistance recipients paying more for third-party supply on average, when you aggregate it, than they would be if they were on standard offer service. So hypothetically, if everybody were on standard offer service, the bills would be X. Those who are on third-party supply, the bills are Y. Is Y minus X a positive or negative number? And if it is a large delta that is that indicates that SOS would be favorable, there would be potentially a significant amount of funds that would be available to meet the shortfall of RGGI. So I would suggest that this is a pretty urgent problem. The Massachusetts Attorney General, it's a little embarrassing even to read out what she said during her press conference, so I won't do it. But I do think that comparable information, if the function of EUSP is to help low-income households meet their bills, and if those bills for large numbers of customers actually, if that assistance is partly, wholly, and maybe sometimes more than wholly flowing to third-party suppliers, then we ought to know that. And I think the resistance that we should simply have a better website and customer information, to me, should be unacceptable. We don't know this thing. What we know from other states that have investigated it indicates there's a severe problem for low-income people. We need to find out if there is a severe problem for us. And without that information, we won't be able to meet this emergency. I appreciate that you told Commissioner O'Donnell, you told OHEP to go to the legislature and ask for more money. I agree with you. I think they should. But I also think that you ought to ask Mr. Freeman, OHEP, OPC, and third-party suppliers and the utilities to get together and give you this number with some urgency. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor.
I had one question. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. As I was saying earlier with the suppliers when they were at the table, some of the data we're looking at, what the data they presented was on a going forward, today going forward. The data that yourself and Ms. Peltier was looking at, as you just mentioned, was from 2013 through 2016. 2013, as we all know, was around the period towards the end of the polar vortex, when there were a lot of things that were price-wise not good in the market. So I guess the question is, when you were talking earlier about the delta between the SOS price and whatever the data shows the price is for SOS or for commodity purchasing for low-income customers, if that delta was different because let me put it a different way. The RESA in their testimony this morning, suggested that that delta favors using suppliers by looking at the data looking forward. And they were suggesting that there's a savings that comes from that. Is that something, as a way of correcting or resolving this, that this commission should look at, if there's a challenge from a data perspective?
Well, Commissioner, obviously polar vortex was an important thing in that particular year. It was 1 year. This is 4 years of data. It wasn't just 1 year. Right. So that's one thing. I have looked at some scattered data. Your own, the report that was filed to you from looking into the Delaware program, I forget the PC number, indicated that anecdotally there's a problem in Maryland that was more current. I can tell you from looking at some data that is current that there is an issue. I'm a scientist and an engineer, so I don't extrapolate from small information. But I think there's enough there currently that, and we know enough from other states, that this is an issue that demands attention from you. You are in charge of ensuring that ratepayer EUSB dollars are well spent, and if they are flowing to third-party suppliers in large measure, and I don't know that they are or not, this is something we should all find out. And then I would say, if what Risa has told you is true, that everybody would save millions of dollars, and overall there'd be $41 million or whatever the number was in savings, it would be great advertising for them if we were to find out what the real numbers are, and then they could get all those customers that they want but currently don't have. The information that we have when this has been gathered, for instance in Massachusetts, whatever the pluses and minuses of that information, on aggregate, their authorities, their regulators, their attorney general has seen fit that this was very damaging to the people of Massachusetts. I think we need to know whether we are in a situation where third-party supply is very damaging to low-income customers. And currently, I am shocked that we don't know this. I did not know this until I met Ms. Peltier, and she has been going from pillar to post. I mean, you have her overall comments and filing of the total data, not low income, as part of PC 47. She told me that she has filed it. I would suggest that at least as a minimum, to start with, from the information that you have, you can ask your staff to give you a memorandum evaluating the information that she has given you and whether the EIA data correspond to what she has said, and year by year, so you can see what the polar vortex was and what was not. So, we would all celebrate if, like in the commercial sector, a large consumer can get a fixed price supply that's a penny less than standard offer service. Wonderful. I've seen that. So I'm not against competition by any means. But as I noted in my questions to Commission staff, to which I have yet to get a response, what are the Commission's criteria for determining competition? Is it simply that we have hundreds of suppliers? If hundreds of suppliers on average have prices that are more than standard offer service, can we really, and if on average we're paying tens of millions of dollars a year or more, not just low income, as indicated by Ms. Peltier's EIA data compilation, competition is supposed to lower prices. Are we lowering prices on average in the residential sector or not? Low income or not? That's one question. I'm still waiting for an answer to my questions. Staff said they would answer them, then they bumped it up to the commissioners. I don't know if you are aware that I have sent these questions. Certainly I know you are, because I told you when you came to our Energy Advocates meeting. But I'm waiting. What are your criteria for competition? I hear a lot about competition, but I haven't seen any analysis of what the effect of competition should be on prices as viewed by you, the Commission. So let me put the ball in your court.
Thank you, Doctor, for your testimony. The ball is in our court.
Thank you, Chairman.
Next up, we'll have the state's Office of the People's Counsel.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Jacob Auslander on behalf of the Maryland Office of People's Counsel. I understand that we're trying to get done by 1, so I'm going to try to keep my comments brief and leave some time for some questions, which I anticipate will be asked. OPC certainly shares some of the sentiments that were made today, thanking OHEP for the work that they've done administering the EUSP. It's a very important program and part of the state's effort to ensure that access to energy service does not depend on a household's income. We were pleased about some of the aspects of the proposed allocation that OHEP included in its proposed operations plan for fiscal year 2019, including the reduction in the amount of IT administrative costs from previous years. We understand that is due in large part to the integration of OHEP's IT system with the Maryland Think initiative, and we would certainly look forward to seeing more data and commentary on how that integration is progressing in future fiscal years. OPC is a bit, frankly, very concerned about the potential for funding shortfalls in the future. We'll note that because of the decline in RGGI revenue, the allocation this year only meets previous year's allocations because of the consumption of a large amount of USP funds that have been over collected in previous years. So this is a pot of money that is a one shot type pot of money. It will not be around next year. So if the RGGI shortfall that has occurred in the past 2 cycles occurs again, then that money will either need to come from another source or will lead to a reduction in the amount of households served and or the amount that those households receive on an average basis. So with that in mind, OPC fully supports and joins the recommendation that a separate commission-directed work group be formed in the vein of PC 27 to reevaluate on a comprehensive level the state's existing energy assistance programs and if possible, to reevaluate whether the current strategy is working. There was some comments made earlier today about perhaps shifting to a percentage of income type payment plan, and OPC would certainly support discussions along those lines. That was an element of what OPC had presented as part of the Affordable Energy Program back in 2011, along with the Commission staff. And the reason that we think that the time for that work group is now is tied not only into the idea that there could be and likely will be shortfalls in the as soon as next year, but also because our office has commissioned a study that by prize of the low-income market here in Maryland, and we received data from OHEP and from DHCD. We utilized census data, and we had our consultants, a prize Institute, produce a report for us called the Maryland Low-Income Market Characterization Study. And the purpose of that study is to provide some data to support what in many cases has been more uncertain data points. So that the report is very comprehensive, and we had made an attempt to have that report completed and published prior to today's hearing. That was not possible, but at this point the draft is near final, and we plan to publish the report in September. So if a work group was convened, they would have this low-income market characterization study as part of the data sets that they could look at to see what what Maryland's low-income housing situation looks like, and what types of programs are likely to work, and which types of approaches are less likely to work.
So, Mr. Auslander, that sounds like a great report, and I look forward to seeing it. But how does that affect EUSP specifically? That sounds like a much broader and very valuable discussion. But is it really one for this commission, or is it more one for the legislature?
Well, I think both. I think that in the past, for example, we don't have a very firm number on the number of eligible households versus the number of households served. We've sort of backed into that data, and I know for the past, for as long as I've been working on the case, we've been using data from a 2011 report. And so it's likely that number is different today, and I would imagine that it's higher, but I don't know that for sure. And then going back to the idea that how much of this is within the purview of the commission alone, and how much of this is a policy decision that needs to be made down in Annapolis, I think that that point is well taken. But I would note that part of the EUSP program is a annual back and forth between the Commission and the General Assembly to inform the General Assembly as to the ways in which the USP program is meeting the need of low-income households to access electricity. And as part of that, there is a directive for DHCD and OHEP to provide data to the Commission so that they can include in that report. So I think that what could eventually come out of this process is a report to the Commission that could help inform the Commission when they're crafting future annual reports as far as whether the level of ratepayer funding and other funding for the EUSP is currently sufficient to meet the need for energy assistance in the state.
And are you suggesting that this work group or advisory group examine affordability as well? Isn't that part of your proposal?
Yeah, we have always tried to focus the discussion on away from maybe energy assistance as just an average amount that a family receives, and more as how much of that household's energy burden is being met by the assistance that's provided to them. So essentially defining affordability.
That's been OPC's argument. Does the statute support EUSP affordability being part of the universal service program, in your view?
Yes, I don't see anything in the statute that would prevent it, and I think that it's the sensible approach.
Well, but the statute specifically says we're supposed to do bill assistance and arrearage reduction.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't mention affordability. It doesn't, we're just supposed to, and it says assistance to all customers, or to eligible customers.
Right.
So I'm not sure, explain to me how that, how affordability works into the existing statute that way.
Well, I certainly think that the goal of the statute is to assist households in paying their energy bills.
Absolutely, it says that.
Right, and I think that the idea that the program is offering some amount of assistance, but not enough to prevent an arrearage from occurring in the future, would certainly run counter to that. To that goal. So, to the extent that the Commission is uncomfortable with the USP statute is currently worded, that could certainly factor in and be included as part of the analysis and recommendations that the Commission makes to the General Assembly, insofar as the Commission might agree with the idea that affordability is the appropriate lens to view the situation through, and request that the General Assembly consider.
Well, is that really, is the Commission's area of expertise affordability, or is it more for Department of, Human Services and DHCD and the Office of People's Counsel, for that matter? Is it not more their area of expertise than the Public Service Commission's?
I think that this is certainly a unique topic that crosses agency jurisdiction. We have several state agencies in the room today, and in previous years we've had multiple state agencies. So I think that it's a complex issue, and certainly one which the General Assembly has currently placed a large amount of oversight and monitoring authority in the Commission. And I think that that is due in large part to the fact that what we're talking about here are energy services that are regulated by this agency.
Do you know how much, do you have an estimate of what a 6% affordability would cost?
I don't have any up-to-date numbers. I know that as part of the AEP, I believe that the estimates that were included was somewhere around $100 million.
And we currently have 37 million.
Of ratepayer funding. And
Ratepayer funding, right.
And a total of funding, if you add in what has been the past few cycles, in a combination of RGGI allocations, this year a shortfall was being made up of over-collected funds. It's about $70 to $75 million.
Right.
So even though the $100 million looks a lot larger than $37 million, it's not substantially larger than what is currently being allocated through multiple sources currently. Now, I will caution that the estimates that were included in the AEP were just that. They were estimates. I think that some of the comments made by Arjun a few minutes ago need to be taken into account, because we think that it would be possible that there could be savings to ratepayers to the extent that arrearages don't end up as uncollectible expenses that are collected from ratepayers in the future. So if you had a properly functioning affordability program, you might reduce costs that will ultimately be paid by ratepayers in a future rate case proceeding.
Right.
Now, as far as quantifying
I think that's a much larger, potentially broader discussion than for the Public Service Commission. But I'll let you continue with your presentation. I have a couple of questions about the supplier.
Sure.
Before you move on, if you're done, Commissioner,
I
you mind
am,
if I
thank you.
follow up on this funding issue? Mr. Auslander, it sounds like OPC is suggesting that we become a strong, convene a work group, and then once we get the results of that work group, that we should go to the legislature and become an interested advocate for funding these programs. And that doesn't sound right to me. I think we should be disinterested when we're sitting here and making decisions amongst the interested parties sitting out there. And so I think you should be doing that, not us. Please respond to that.
Sure, certainly. The purpose of the report that I envision coming out of this work group process would be akin to the Affordable Energy Program that was presented to the Commission in previous years, and certainly a tool that other interested stakeholders could bring to the General Assembly of their own accord. I think that it's important for the Commission to play a role in this because of the oversight authority that the Commission has over the EOSP program.
Right, but we have to maintain an independence, a certain level of independence in that oversight authority. So this is a different animal. Yes, we have very significant oversight authority, but we can't be an interested party and just become another stakeholder in this. We have to be arbiters of this. How do you suggest to us that we need to become an interested party?
Sure, and I understand what you're saying, but I think the way I understand the General Assembly's intent when they passed the EOSP statute was that there would not just simply be an oversight authority being administered by the Commission, but that there would also be a report that would be submitted to the Commission, to the General Assembly each year, to inform the General Assembly as to whether or not the program is meeting the goals that they intended, and if not, then to increase or decrease the amount of funding accordingly.
Well, I just, without being argumentative, I think that we will give a report. We will follow the statute. We will report on these proceedings. But that doesn't mean that becomes an advocacy tool for funding. That's a very different animal.
Well, I will only mention that in previous annual reports, the Commission has referenced, for example, the Affordable Energy Program, including the $100 million estimate that included. So this would not be a departure from what the Commission has done in previous years in regards to the EOSP program.
So it advocated for funding
It-
levels
it-
coming
it-
out of the general fund?
it reported-
Or other streams?
It reported the recommendations that were made by the Affordable Energy Program for the General Assembly's information, but it did not. I guess I understand what you're saying. No, it did not advocate for the adoption or non-adoption.
So my point is, we can't go to the legislature on the stakeholders' behalf and advocate for funding in these programs in a specific way. We can be reporters of these proceedings in our oversight capacity, but we can't become an interested party before the legislature and then come back here and sit en banc to make these decisions. They're often contested, as we see today.
Sure. To the extent that you're using interested party as essentially adopting a position that a stakeholder or a group of stakeholders holds versus other stakeholders, I guess I agree with your point. But I think that in providing a comprehensive and complete picture to the General Assembly on the status of the EUSP program, the work group that we're envisioning could certainly help inform that discussion.
So just to wrap this up, I think we agree then, status reporting is fine. Advocacy is a very different animal.
Sure, I'll agree with that.
All right, thank you.
Sure. So, moving along, one of the additional pieces of information that I think would be helpful for the General Assembly to understand is how the current EUSP funds are actually being utilized. We've made two specific recommendations that are based on a uncertainty due to a lack of data as to the amount of bill payment assistance funds that are essentially being used as mini arrearage retirement assistance funds. And we note that OHEP has recognized that that is an issue and has actually requested in their comments any assistance that the Commission could give. And what, as I understand the presentations by the utilities a few hours ago, PEPCO apparently does have some type of portal that OHEP could be given access to find that information, I guess on an individual customer by individual customer basis. And to the extent that OHEP can use that access to answer that question, we think that that would be helpful because we share the Commission staff's view that the bill payment assistance prong of the EUSP program is the most important one. It's intended to prevent arrearages from occurring in the first place and limiting the size of the arrearage that does occur. So we would certainly like to be able to answer the simple question of how much money that we're calling bill payment assistance is actually being used for additional or supplemental arrearage retirement assistance. We also think that it's important for the Commission to understand what amount of EUSP funding is being utilized inefficiently in relation to what level of benefits could have been provided if the commodity price of the energy being consumed was at the SOS or utility default rate versus what they might be paying to a retail energy supplier. We've made this request in previous years, and parties have opposed that request for the same reasons that were mentioned today. I will reiterate that this is not a novel idea in the sense that no state agency, no similar state agency in other jurisdiction has ever requested this information. As mentioned earlier today, both New York and Massachusetts have.
Mr. Auslander, what's the end game for this information?
Well, in light of the fear that we are going to experience funding shortfalls, or even fears that the current level of funding is not meeting the need for energy assistance in the state, it would be important to know whether certain efficiencies exist that could be exploited. So if it came back that you look at the aggregated data regarding the number of customers that are participating in the USP and taking supply from an energy supplier, and that that ends up in fiscal year 2018, for example, that 17% of the funding was used to pay for commodity charges in excess of the utilities default rate. That would certainly be something that the Commission would want to know, and would be a useful bit of information to guide any decisions that the Commission makes within the current USP program, but also to be included in the annual report to the General Assembly, to the extent that the General Assembly might want to use that information to create a more efficient program that would not require additional funding sources. It would just require legislation to make the use of existing funding sources more efficient.
So you're saying that the legislature would have to make changes to the law before we were to take any action, for example, that this commission couldn't take any specific action, say, and I am not by any means suggesting this, so I don't want anybody to think that I am, that people who take EUSP can't take from a supplier. You're saying that legislation would be required for that to happen?
I don't think that I would agree. I think that the Commission has the authority to act outside of legislation. I think that if you have evidence in front of you that a certain amount of ratepayer funds, USP ratepayer funds, are being utilized inefficiently because they're leading to less of a bill payment assistance benefit being paid to eligible households, or even limiting the number of households that can receive a benefit because there's not enough money to go around. I certainly think that the Commission has the inherent authority to take steps to remedy that. But I also think that if the Commission didn't agree with that could be information that the Commission could decide to share with the General Assembly with a recommendation or a note that this is information that the General Assembly might find useful in deciding whether a certain policy should be enacted through additional legislation, either by revisions to the EOSP program or something new.
Okay, so one more question, which is if we're looking at aggregated information anyway, isn't it possible for OPC and for information to be gathered from the websites that are currently out there available, like the Commission's website, as to what offers are available in BGE service territory, to be able to, at least for a going forward basis, perhaps not look backward, but going forward, to be able to compare the SOS price versus the supplier offers?
No, because we need to know how many. We need to know a much more limited data set than what offers are available. We need to know what EOSP customers are receiving supply from a retail supplier and how much they are paying in aggregate. So some of the concerns that were raised earlier is that, well, some people might be saving money and some people might be paying more. But what we're asking for is the aggregated data, so that would be netted out. So maybe there's a net benefit. Maybe there's.
So how do we take into account the concept that somebody might have gotten a gift card or a mini fridge or something else? How do we take into account?
I'm glad you bring that up, because I think that's exactly why the General Assembly needs to know this. Because I think if the General Assembly understood that these ratepayer funds are being used to buy Netflix subscriptions or gift cards or other non-electricity services, that they should be aware of that, because it was not intended by the legislature when they enacted the EOSP statute.
So how are you going to get that data? Because the utilities won't know whether the person got a gift card or a mini fridge.
Right. So what I really need is when we can do it by fiscal year, and I know there's some concern earlier about whether there would be there's too many customers potentially that would be participating. I think the number of 45,000 was thrown up by BG&E and 28,000 by PHI. So we could do a representative sample. So we wouldn't need to do all of them. Plus, I didn't understand. I understood that the 45,000 and the 28,000 to be the number of EOSP participants, and I'm assuming not 100% are taking their supply from a retail supplier. Some smaller number would be, but regardless, we could construct a representative sample. I also think all we need is the billing dates and the usage for a period and the amount of charges that were in the retail commodity portion of the bill, because I already know what the SOS rates would be for those corresponding billing periods. So it would be easy to do the analysis at that point. And
So are you, just to short circuit this, are you willing to talk to the utilities to see what they have available and to try to reach agreement on what might be accessible?
yes, and we have been, and we have made the request in other proceedings and work groups. I think what we were getting at in our comments for this year's proposed operations plan is some direction from the commission that the utilities should work with OPC and other stakeholders. I think that this issue is larger than OPC. I think that it really affects everybody sitting in this room, and I think that it's incredibly important that we be able to answer that question. I think the public policy would demand that we be able to tell the General Assembly, for example, how much of these scarce energy assistance dollars are being used to buy gift cards or Netflix subscriptions or other non-electricity services.
Right. Well, I'm not sure I agree with your characterization, but I'll let some of the other commissioners. Thank you.
So why should we care if they get a gift card or a mini fridge or a case of minis in the mini fridge if it's cheaper than SOS?
Well, I could think of many reasons. One is that every extra dollar that goes to a customer that's making that choice, that's one extra dollar that's going to another family who
It's
is
saving ratepayers money. You're the attorney for the ratepayers. If it's cheaper than SOS, it's saving ratepayers money.
No, the statute it caps the amount of ratepayer funding, so that doesn't change in any given year. The only thing that changes is how that money is
But that
utilized.
customer's use of the ratepayer funds is less than the SOS charge in
No,
some situation.
Well, we don't know that.
Well, I'm saying if it's less than SOS, why should we care?
Maybe because maybe then you require every USB participant to have a supplier, because that would be a more efficient way to do it, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
so I think the reason that
The problem I'm suggesting to you is not the gift card or the mini fridge or any other, enticements or bundled services. The problem is what the ultimate cost is to the state and to the ratepayers, right? But it's not the.
No,
I
completely disagree. Respectfully,
You can
Commissioner.
cast gift cards in a pejorative light if you wish, but that's not the issue. The issue
My,
is
my,
cost.
my point is that a finite pot of money has been allocated for this program, and that pot of money can be used to do many things. It could fund more households at a higher benefit level, or it could fund fewer households at a lower benefit
So you're
level.
suggesting even if it costs more money and we service less customers with that finite pot of money, that you're going to hang your hat on that argument, even though you're the ratepayer's attorney?
No, I think that we should know how the money is being used, whether because I don't think that you can assume, and I think the data from New York and Massachusetts would suggest that unless Maryland is for some reason different, that we are using these scarce resources inefficiently. We are spending more for the same amount of service. Now, it could be that an individual customer is getting something in addition to electricity service, and that's why I bring up Netflix subscriptions and cable subscriptions, because these are the type of value-added products that RISA and other industry stakeholders have raised in other proceedings, including in New York. In the New York proceeding, they looked and they tried to put a value on what the suppliers were calling value-added or bundled services, and decided that they hadn't established that there was, a tangible benefit, or at least a benefit that should outweigh the compelling public interest in assuring that scarce public funds be used efficiently and for the purposes for which they are intended.
So even if it's less than the SOS cost, you would still maintain that argument? Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm asking for is the data, so we know if the participants in USP that are taking supply from an energy supplier are actually paying less.
But I'm asking you. If it's less than if that data shows that it's less than the SOS cost from a third-party supplier, you would still make that same argument?
I don't understand when you say what argument am I making? Is what I guess I don't understand.
If it's cheaper in the aggregate,
then
why do we care? what else is bundled in with it? If it's cheaper,
Right.
who cares?
The only argument, Commissioner, that we're making today is to get the access to the information to answer that question. We are not suggesting anything else because we don't know what the answer is. If we find out that customers with retail suppliers are paying less, that might inform policy choice in the future, and we'll go there when we get that information. If on the flip side we find out that customers that are participating with a retail energy supplier are paying more, then that could inform the discussion and might lead to an argument that my agency will make to this commission as far as the specific policy action. But all I'm asking for today is access to the data so we can answer that question.
And just to be clear, you are only seeking aggregate data, not individual customer.
That's right. So this data would not be able to be used for to identify any individual customer or a supplier. So this would be anonymized and aggregated. We're just talking about how much money is being paid out of EUSP ratepayer funds, or I guess to the extent that some of retirement assistance is being paid out of the REGI funds, how much of that is being paid to retail suppliers in excess or below the prevailing utility default rate.
So, isn't the logical conclusion to this concern that whether or not the data shows that there's a increase, or that customers on or low income are paying more for their commodity, regardless of what the data shows? If we know that there are suppliers that are charging less than the SOS rate, why isn't OPC and other parties suggesting that we should be encouraging low-income customers to sign up with those suppliers?
Well, I think that could certainly be a policy direction that could be followed. So the policy could be that USP participants can participate, can have a retail supplier if the retail rate that they pay is at or below the prevailing utility default rate.
But
and in fact, I guess you could go that way just from the beginning, because it would seem to me that public policy should lead to that result. So why not just make it a rule without any data? And OPC would support that effort. But that's not what we're asking for today. We just want to see what the data suggests.
Well, the reason why I ask it is because let's assume that the data shows the concern that you have, that these low-income customers are paying more for their commodity rate. It will take, just because it takes time to do this kind of thing, it will take at least a year to calculate the data, gather it all up, make sure we know what we're asking for is useful. So during that period of time, again, assuming that the end result is the result you're concerned of, those customers will have been paying more for the SOS rate, for their commodity. So if we suspect that to be the case, at least some parties do, why aren't we just saying, why aren't the advocates that are concerned about this simply saying, look, there are suppliers that are saying that they will charge you less than the commodity rate. At least that's the data that we receive from RISA. Why aren't we suggesting to those low-income customers to just enroll with those guys?
So as far as OPC going out to low-income customers and advising them
by OPC, I mean advocates in general. Any advocates that are concerned that this is a challenge.
Well, I think the perspective and the position that our agency has is in the limited resources that we have mean that we represent the interests of residential ratepayers in the context of proceedings such as this one, making policy recommendations to the Commission as far as ways that these programs can be improved. I think that what we're getting at this point is really a sort of basic access to information, so that we can that might inform policy decisions in the future. And I said, absent that information, if the Commission was interested in pursuing something along the lines of, well, how about ESP customers have to have a supplier that have to use suppliers, and that the suppliers have to have a rate below SOS, which is, I believe, at least something that has been considered in other jurisdictions. We would not object to that, because going back to Commissioner O'Donnell's point, it's saving, it's good for my clients. So of course we're behind that.
Okay.
but that's not the world we live in today, and I think that we're making this request because we're worried that the situation is more like that in New York and Massachusetts, and that unfortunately some of these scarce dollars are being used inefficiently.
I guess that was the question that I was raising, is that at least we've heard from some suppliers that suggest that is the world, or could be the world today, that customers today could go and obtain a lower commodity rate and I guess whatever other perks that come with it. But that's what has been supported.
Right, and I think that then they should welcome a more comprehensive approach along the lines of what we're asking for. It won't infringe on any trade secret or proprietary information that they're claiming. It will inform the Commission in the furtherance of its duties under the USP statute, and frankly, it's just sound public policy that has been followed in other jurisdictions, and that's why we included it in our comments.
Thank you.
And I just had one final remark. Mr. Freeman earlier today mentioned that OHEP would be submitting future fiscal year operations plans by June 1st of the applicable year, which would mean that the operations plan for fiscal year 2020 would be filed on June 1st, 2019, and that future annual reports on the previous fiscal year would be provided by October 31st, which I believe would mean that the annual report for fiscal year 2018 would be filed on October 31st of 2018. And I raise that issue because I understand that Mr. Freeman has agreed to do that, but unfortunately OHEP has made representations that they'll do that in the past. So to the extent that the Commission agrees with OPC that this is important, we would request that they either note or possibly even direct OHEP to file by those dates in its order in this case.
We will accept the commitment that OHEP verbally made today to supply those documents on those dates, and I believe Mr. Freeman agreed to that.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Oslander. Obviously, complicated issue, particularly access to pricing information. A lot of variables here, a lot of arguments. Thank you.
Sure.
We will conclude with a presentation or comments by Ms. Garofalo of PSC staff.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, Commissioners. Staff generally supports OHEP's proposed funding as set forth in its plan. With regard to the arrearage prevention plan, we do think, we've discussed this with Mr. Freeman, that the wording of the legislation really means that the funding must come from this year's plan, and the reason for that is that this year they're getting, I think it's about $11 million from an overcollection in the past, and that would be the excess funding that OHEP is relying on. We're delighted that OHEP is open now in June, so that it's open 12 months a year, and we are also looking forward to having earlier plans and reports. These are important for the Commission because, as I don't have to tell you, but I will anyway, you need the report in order to file your report and recommendation to the General Assembly, and you need the plan in order to hold this hearing, and you have to be able to consider that in advance. I'd like to spend just a tiny bit of time talking about PC 27 and competitive supply, not in that order. So I think it seems to me that everyone agrees that PC 27 is closed. You've written a report to the General Assembly, and there could be another approach. You could direct a new public conference be opened and be very precise in what you wanted to be handled there, you could encourage OHEP or direct OHEP to perhaps consider that among its own stakeholders. Whatever happens, you would there would need to be a legislative change, and so it would be a heavy lift. Staff did join with OPC in its recommendation for a percentage of income plan in PC 27. However, it's important to keep in mind when in thinking about a percentage of income plan, and this was something that concerned us at the time, that you would be going from a plan that you have now, which serves a specific slice of the population. It's very clearly defined, and that the new plan would not necessarily cover these same people. Some of the people who are covered now may well not be covered in a percentage of income plan. And it's important also not to overlook that the current plan does bring definite advantages. It currently, in combination with LIHEAP, does bring down for everybody the energy burden to 10% on average. So for low-income people, it brings it down even further. And this is at a relatively low cost to ratepayers. The commercial customers are making a payment that they basically committed to at the time of restructuring, and so there wouldn't be probably the same cooperation, not that it couldn't be ordered, but there wouldn't be the same cooperation in the future. So just things to keep in mind with regard to percentage of income plan. With regard to competitive supply, staff for several years made a recommendation, and we've stopped making it, but it sounds to me like maybe it's time to make it again. In the past, and I apologize, Bill, I don't know if you still do this, but in the past, fuel merchants would be authorized by OHEP to sell to EUSP recipients, well, actually to MEP recipients, if they offered a discount of 2%. And I think that something similar could be done for competitive suppliers. If a competitive supplier agreed to sell at or below SOS, they would be an authorized EUSP supplier, and they could then market to EUSP participants. And I think this could be going forward. There wouldn't be the problem with the data. I'm not opposed to getting the data. I just agree it's a heavy lift, and sometimes the data is less valuable than we think when we start out to gather it. And that's all I have to say. I'm available for questions if you have any.
Ms. Garofalo, I wanted to ask you something about your last question, the 2% less, for instance, from SOS. Are you talking about the commodity price only?
Well, so that's complicated. But let me say, I'm not proposing 2% less for SOS.
I'm just using it for example.
But I'm saying just at or below. Right. So, I was sitting there and I was debating what to say about that. I'm speaking here only for myself. I won't speak for all of staff.
If you need to consider that,
yeah,
and you don't have an answer on behalf of staff, that's okay right now.
Okay, right. Let me do that.
Thank you.
Can I just get a clarification? So your staff would not, you say, would not be opposed to getting the data?
No.
Do you think if we were to order that people to get together for a conversation, the parties get together for a conversation to discuss whether there be value, is that something that staff would support or think is valuable? And this is this would be first for the arrearage issue, money that is going for
the bill payment, but is actually ending up in
Right.
arrearages, and for this question on the retail.
Yeah, we would, of course, support that. We participate in that.
Okay, thanks.
I had just two questions. One, just for a clarification on your earlier comment regarding a legislative change for PC 27. If certainly the first version, I'll just call it, of PC 27 is closed. I mean, we've already written an order on that, or excuse me, a report to the General Assembly. So if we were to initiate a second work group, or ask or directed a second work group look at a similar issue or the same issue, we don't need a legislative change to do that, right?
To direct the work group
So
to
direct
convene?
the-
No.
Okay.
I didn't mean to imply that.
Okay, so the result that it comes up with, we may need, depending on what that is, we may need some
Correct.
legislative. Okay.
That's what I meant. If it wasn't clear, that's definitely what I meant to say.
Okay. All right. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Let me just ask one other question about this work group, or actually the public conference. Given that it sounds like we would need Annapolis in any case if we were going to make any significant changes to weigh in on this, or at least to provide the authority to change this, have public conferences been used in the past specifically to initiate? I kind of agree with Commissioner O'Donnell. I want to avoid the word advocacy, but to get the legislature to take some kind of an action? Or could this, again, be something better led by, like OHEP?
Well, that I can't answer that, but certainly had PC 27 gone, we were directed to look at the country, see what was being done in the country. We did that. Then we were directed to form a work group and see what we could come up with as a plan to revise EUSP. We did that. Now, the plan that was proposed, and if you look in PC 27, the plan you'll see, is very loose. And I think our thought was that we would put this loose plan in front of the commission, and the commission would invite us to put that in front of the commission if they wanted us to, if they wanted to hear about it. And then if that would give us some clue as to whether or not the commission itself was willing to follow this. And then we would develop it in more detail. And at that point, it would be time to go to Annapolis. So I guess we didn't get to what your real question is does that change the role of the commission by doing that? I think we did not think that at the time because I think the current EUSP grew out of restructuring, and the commission was certainly involved in that. So.
Okay. Well, so it would be a fairly long process to get to a potential recommendation to the legislature. And I would observe that if there's already an advisory committee that sits at OHEP, they might be able to do it faster.
Well, I don't know. There's so many variables in it. I guess I personally don't think we could go to Annapolis with merely a recommendation. We'd have to go with something that was pretty well worked out.
Whatever the finding is from the conference could end up in a report to the legislature. So I was just, again, trying to understand, okay, how much time it would take to actually get a recommendation to the legislature for a change, as opposed to another method.
I think years, but I'm a pretty methodical person, so I think that, first there has to be the concept, then there has to be how would the concept work in practice, at least not to the most minute detail, but so you're pretty sure. Then you'd have to write legislation, then you'd have to get the legislation passed.
Right. Okay. And I was just looking at the PSC process and how it could be a fairly lengthy process even to get to the potential.
Correct.
Again,
yes.
I hesitate to call it a recommendation, but finding. So great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garofalo. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion today regarding a forum, whether it be in the vein of resurrecting PC 27 or just getting conference room for the parties to have discussions in. I would say don't wait for us to act. We will follow up with a written determination, but there's no bar on RISA, OHEP, Commission staff, OPC, and other parties from beginning these discussions. And I think it's important to begin having these communications even absent formal Commission action. So I would ask that the parties at least begin to exchange information so we could get moving on that. This has been a very interesting discussion today. I want to thank all the parties for their participation. As I mentioned, there will be subsequent written determination to be issued in this case number. This meeting is now adjourned.